Chapter 258. Melon Consortium. Conference Hall. On both sides of the thick long table sat more than a dozen deacons of the consortium. They represented the middle noble families. Mark and Rudolph were sitting in the main seat. Their names were still resounding in the commercial district. They had created their own glory. Now they were the hegemons of their own business dynasties. Their family's industrial chain was spread across 3 regions and thousands of towns. Their names were more resounding than famous poets and dramatists. 7 or 8 years ago, the Maitian orphanage in the slums knew about the Mel family's status. One could see the far-reaching influence of the Mel family. My assistant has passed the news to all of you. The main purpose of this meeting is to discuss the purchase of the new military item, the crossbow. Mark gently leaned on the back of the chair. His body didn't look bloated. His cheeks were firm and dignified. There was a faint smile on his face. According to the news from the Elemental Association, this item has been submitted to the Elemental Association by Master Kelt. It's being evaluated. The preliminary evaluation results are good. There's a 70% probability that it's a 3-star item. There shouldn't be many consortiums that know about this. Perhaps the Scott Consortium already knows about it, and so does the military. We need to get this divine artifact before they make their move. Recently, the war outside the borders has been very tense. The barbarians have repeatedly invaded our borders. If we can use this batch of divine artifacts in battle, it'll be worth even more than a 4-star military-grade artifact. Mark gently tapped his finger on the table. Moreover, if this crossbow can replace the other 3-star crossbows, then we will eliminate a 3-star item. At present, our consortium and the military are cooperating with each other. We don't have 3-star crossbows yet. The snake crossbow was bought by the Green Consortium. If this crossbow can replace the snake crossbow, then we can use it to attack the Green Consortium and squeeze some blood out of their hands. At this point, he glanced at the crowd and said with a smile, "Now, what do you think is the most suitable price for us to offer?" The people on both sides of the thick long table looked at each other and exchanged glances with each other. After a moment, a graceful lady said, "Since this crossbow's function can overlap with another 3-star item, then it can also overlap with other items and be eliminated. I feel that the lowest price we can offer is a mid-grade 3-star item. After all, it's only a 70% chance of success. There was a 90% chance of success in the past, but in the end, the situation was completely reversed. Therefore, mid-grade 3-star is my bottom line." Hearing her words, many people nodded slightly. What she said made sense. Seconded. Agreed. Recently, the barbarians outside the border have been attacking us again and again, which has consumed a lot of military weapons. If a good military magic is used in the war, it can even change the course of the war. Although it can't recreate the legend of a crossbow dominating the battlefield, the return will be great. I suggest to treat it as a 3-star high-grade weapon. Yes, I agree. Everyone expressed their opinions one after another. One of them asked, "I heard that the young man who made this crossbow has a grudge with our consortium. Will he agree if we go to buy it?" Many people were surprised to hear this. One of them asked, "Grudge? What grudge? Is it because of that old guy Old Fooline?" The first person shook his head and looked at Rudolph. "Patriarch Belong knows about it. I've only heard about it." Many people were surprised to hear Rudolph's words. Rudolph glanced at the person who had spoken. Then he glanced at the people around him. This person was a hunter of our consortium many years ago. He had offended the nobility and despised the nobility. I have severely punished him. Now he has abandoned the consortium and found Old Fooline to support him. His conduct is improper and he is vainly trying to retaliate against the consortium. My opinion is to refuse all cooperation with him. Everyone was shocked but soon returned to normal. They quietly looked at each other. Someone immediately said, "We can't tolerate him despising the nobility. He is just a lowly civilian. He has forgotten his identity. I also suggest to sever all cooperation with him in the future. At the same time, we should list the New World Consortium as one of our business targets. Now he is studying in the temple. If he grows up in the future, he will be a hidden danger. We must eradicate him as soon as possible to preserve the interests of the consortium. Well, I agree with Mr. Missy. Even if we cooperate with such a rebellious person, it is inevitable that he will bite us in the future. 4 or 5 people expressed their views. Mark glanced at these people. His eyes flashed, but his face didn't show any thoughts. The others looked at each other with some regret in their eyes. They sighed and shook their heads, not saying anything. Things had already come to this, and they had already offended the other party. Unless they offered a higher price, it would be a waste of effort. Other consortiums or the military would definitely snatch the business away. If they offered a higher price to make up for the previous conflict, it would not be worth it. In short, because of this conflict, this business could only be abandoned. Rudolph was silent for a moment. He slowly got up and said, "This matter started because of our Bourong family. Please forgive us for the loss of benefits." He bowed slightly as he finished speaking. The people who had complained before were shocked. They didn't expect that a person like him would apologize in public. They were flattered and hurriedly got up to persuade him to return the courtesy. Mark also stood up and patted Rudolph's shoulder. "Brother, I don't blame you for this matter. Blame yourself for being too soft-hearted. You should have executed the kid who despised the nobility instead of letting him live to this day. In short, the New World Consortium will be included in the list of our enemy consortia. We must strangle them in the cradle before they grow up. This is the lightest price we have to pay. It's just a trifling 3-star item. Master Caro's work will come out in a while. We will usher in the glorious moment of our consortium. Yes, we will take advantage of the economic monopoly of the New World Consortium. Let's see how they will turn the situation around. Everyone, I already have a plan that can destroy them immediately." "Oh? Let's hear it." Time passed by quickly. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. There was a castle by the Mosa River. The dark red curtains blocked the dazzling light from outside. The breeze would move the curtains from time to time. A few white shadows would come in through the gap. At the moment, Dean was standing in the room. He looked at the towering mechanical assembly in the center of the room. From all angles, there was nothing missing. It integrated all the necessary parts of a lightning rod. The only drawback was that the conductor was short. It was only suitable for a 3-story castle. In the future, the cost of plastic materials will also have to be taken into account. Dean murmured. Finally, he carefully checked it again. After confirming that there were no errors, he disassembled it and put it into several suitcases. When all of them were packed, he came to the window and lifted the curtain. The sunlight was like snow sprinkling on his body. It was a bit dazzling. "It seems that 3 days have passed." Dean looked at the sky outside. "It's rare to see the good weather. The results of the element association should be out by now. I don't know if it will be of medium or high grade or fine quality." Thinking of this, there was a little expectation in his heart. He closed the window to avoid the wild cat jumping in. He turned around and picked up his suitcase and quickly went downstairs. He was the only one in the castle. Plus the dim light made the place damp and gloomy. But he had seen the monsters outside the giant wall and had been exposed to the scientific world since childhood. He didn't believe in ghosts and gods, so he didn't feel afraid. Chapter 259. On the mountainside of Druga Mountain, in the Divine Hall between the fortress and the 11th fortress. At dawn, there were already hundreds of figures clustered in front of the door. Among them, only about half of them were dressed in the robes of the god's emissary. Most of them were outsiders who were dressed neatly and decently. These people were naturally the people sent by various consortiums and nobles to observe the situation. Among the many gods' emissaries, There were also some students sent by the Masters and Junior Gods emissaries who came to observe out of curiosity. Hey, you're here too? Why are you here? Haha, did you also see the notice posted last night? The Element Association has already evaluated you, and today it will be included in the exchange table. TSK, I wonder how many points are needed to exchange. Definitely a lot. After all, the worst one is a 2-star item. If it's good, it might even be a 3-star item. Do you want to exchange? Don't joke around. I'm not going to waste my money. I'm just here to look at the introduction on the exchange page and see how powerful this thing is. Hee, me too. The people in front of the hall discussed in low voices. When the sunlight pierced through the corner of the temple, the 8-meter-high gate of the temple slowly opened. An old man stood in front of the gate and glanced at the crowd outside. His eyelids drooped, and he staggered into the temple. Old Shi, you're up early today. Go quickly. The people waiting in front of the stairs immediately rushed in. Soon, the crowd arrived at the hall of the Divine Incantation Hall and immediately looked at the bulletin board. Whenever a new incantation appeared, it would be posted on the bulletin board of the Divine Incantation Hall for a day as free publicity. After the first day, it would be listed in the exchange list of the Divine Incantation Hall. Therefore, many people would often neglect the most suitable incantation because of their own carelessness when exchanging for an incantation. When everyone looked over, they immediately saw that the first page of the notice board was filled with 4 familiar words. Military crossbow. It was the divine art piece that had been the talk of the town for the past few days. When everyone's gaze shifted from the huge words to the ranking evaluation below, the hall instantly fell into a dead silence. 4 stars? In the short period of dead silence, a person swallowed his saliva and spoke with a trembling voice. The icy silence was immediately broken. Everyone was in an uproar as they looked at the ranking evaluation in shock. The 4 dazzling purple stars were extremely eye-catching and firmly attracted everyone's eyes. 4-star purple item. Not only is this item a 4-star item, but it's also a 4-star upper-grade item? This is too unreasonable. Could it be that the evaluation standards have been lowered? This is too exaggerated. Is this done by a newcomer? Wasn't it rumored that it only took half a day to make? What's this newcomer's name? He's too fierce. While they were in disbelief, many people quickly reacted and looked at the details of the functions below. With that, they were shocked again. Oh my God, it's a melee weapon. This crossbow is actually for close combat. This is going to break the record. A close-range crossbow can actually get a 4-star upper-grade evaluation? Did the Elemental Association make a mistake? Look, it says that the crossbow has a range of about 100 to 200 meters. No wonder it's a melee weapon. It's amazing. How did they make such a crossbow? Almost all of the people who were shocked by the effects of the crossbow were wood element architects. They knew the knack of the crossbow. Some people squeezed out of the crowd and went to the exchange counter. They went to the old man, Old Shi, who had opened the door to complete the exchange procedures. The people sent by other consortiums and nobles quickly recorded the functions and effects of the crossbow. They immediately squeezed out of the crowd and left the hall. 4-star upper grade? Inside the Scott Financial Group's conference room, Charsto couldn't help but cry out as he opened the report. Even with his mental fortitude, this news shocked him to the point of forgetting himself. The people on both sides of the long table who were waiting for the results were stunned. In the Ryan castle, Sandro hurriedly ran into the study and almost fell at the door. He pushed the door open with a flushed face and his body was trembling with excitement. Father, it's a 4-star, it's actually a 4-star. 4 stars? Old Fulin was startled. After a moment, there was a smile on his old face. Melon Consortium. Conference room. The Melon Consortium didn't hold a meeting today, as they had given up the cooperation with Dean and New World Consortium. However, today was the weekly financial meeting of the consortium. Mark was talking about the financial market of the consortium when he heard a knock on the door. "Come in," Mark said in a patient tone. He didn't like to be disturbed when he was talking. The door opened and a young man dressed as a gentleman carefully came in. Mark's eyes lit up as he saw the young man. "Good at meeting room. If it's not an important matter, then you know the consequences." The young man panicked as he saw the stiff expression on Mark's face. "Patriarch, I'm here to report the news about Mr. Dean's new invention," Mark coldly snorted. "Get out of here." A middle-aged man who was sitting next to him smiled. "Mr. Mell, since he has come, then let him talk about the news. We also want to know what kind of movement this little guy can make. Is it really a 3-star item?" "Yes." "Let him finish talking before he leave. He's already here." Several people tried to persuade the young man. Mark looked at the young man. "I'll give you 10 seconds. The young man's face turned pale. "The result is out. It's a 4-star item. It's a close combat weapon." Aye, that's all." He was worried about the 10 seconds. He looked at Mark as he was afraid that he would exceed the time limit. However, he found that Mark's expression was frozen. Rudolph was standing behind Mark with a gloomy expression on his face. He was stunned for a moment. A building in the 9th castle of the Temple of Elements. A teenager wearing a primary architect's robe rushed into a room in a panic. He immediately saw Tiffany sitting on the windowsill. Tiffany was sitting next to a piano. Her sitting posture was elegant, as if she was a graceful pianist. However, her nearly 1.8 meters tall body had erased the gentleness and softness. Instead, she had a bit of firmness and majesty about her. She didn't know how to play the piano, but she loved it. At this moment, she was stroking the piano keys. Hearing the boy's rapid breathing, her eyelids twitched slightly, and some dark clouds that had been suppressed in the bottom of her heart suddenly became a little heavier. She slowly put away her fingers on the piano and calmly said, "Is it really 3 stars?" Chapter 260. "No, it's not." The youth's face was complex. "It's not a 3-star item. The result of the evaluation was unexpected. It's a 4-star item." Tiffany was relieved but was stunned when she heard the youth's words. 4-star item? High-grade item? Tiffany looked at the youth. She suspected that she had an auditory hallucination. The youth smiled. "Yes, the news has spread outside. It's the first 4-star military item in 5 years. Moreover, it's the highest level of close combat crossbow." Close combat crossbow? Tiffany was startled once again. Her mind was in chaos. She suddenly remembered the scene a few days ago in the temple. She had seen a young and arrogant figure. Although she couldn't remember his face, but his dark and deep eyes were more and more clear. They were like 2 demonic stars in the night, cold and gloomy. 4-star top-grade, close combat crossbow. She muttered to herself. In just half a day, the news about the military crossbow swept through all the major consortiums like a hurricane. It also swept through all the castles of the Temple of Element. Even the primary architects were aware of the news. After all, the emergence of a top-grade 4-star item. Although it couldn't change the world like a legendary item, it would still promote a great change in certain parts of the world and even create a new pattern. Moreover, this time it was produced by the strongest newcomer who had just won the Epoch medal. The news spread very fast. It wasn't inferior to a 5-star item produced by a master. Of course, it wasn't inferior to a 5-star item produced by a master. Churchill. The youth was driving the carriage slowly on the mountain road. 3 or 5 teenagers wearing primary architects' robes were walking together. They were eagerly discussing things. They passed by the youth who was driving the carriage. They didn't recognize the coachman as the one they were talking about. Huh! Dean was surprised as he passed by the primary architects. 4-star top grade? Close combat crossbow? Are they talking about my work? He looked in the direction of the 10 castles. Most of the primary architects had come back from the Temple of the 10 Castles. He was surprised. Although he expected that the military crossbow would be very practical, but he didn't expect that the Temple of Elements would give it such a high evaluation. It seems that it's very difficult for a senior architect to make a 4-star crossbow. A senior architect who can make 2 4-star crossbows is basically qualified to be promoted to a master architect. However, the premise is that they have to hand over 2 4-star artifacts to the Temple of Elements to exchange for points. There was a smile on Dean's face. He thought that it would be a 3-star or high-grade crossbow. Now it seemed that the value of this crossbow was far higher than what he had imagined. Apart from the new textile machine, this was his first official work after joining the Temple of Elements. It was enough to suppress all the criticism. Although he didn't care about these criticisms, it represented a kind of value to be valued by people. However, it was not a good thing for him to take such a high step. When the military crossbow was born, his existence in the New World Consortium would no longer be invisible. The hidden threat should have already been noticed by the other consortiums. While he was receiving praise and praise, he would also be accompanied by knives and knives. However, he had already expected this. That's why he declined the invitations of the nobles for entertainment and dinner. Instead, he worked hard to make lightning rods in his castle. Dean shook the reins and changed the direction. He didn't continue to go to the Temple of Elements. It would be overcrowded if he was recognized. There was no need to waste time to be in the limelight. Dean drove the carriage back to the 7th castle. He saw 6 or 7 figures standing at the entrance of the castle. They were looking left and right. One of them was Bernard. He was surprised for a moment but immediately guessed what was going on. He jumped out of the carriage and carried a few suitcases out of the carriage. He walked along the small ramp towards the castle. Bernard and the others saw Dean when they were about 100 or 200 meters away from him. They were pleasantly surprised as they rushed to greet him. Dean! Dean! Mr. Dean! Bernard took the lead and ran over. So many things. Let me help you. He raised his hand to grab a suitcase that was hooked by Dean's little finger. His arm sank as he lifted it. What's inside? It's so heavy. Is it metal? At this time, the other 4 or 5 people also ran over one after another. Among them, there was a tall and slender young woman with snow-white skin. She was also a divine emissary of the same castle. Her beautiful eyes flickered with an extraordinary splendor. She stood behind the crowd and carefully sized up this young man. "I'll help you. I'll help." Several youths enthusiastically came forward to help Dean. Dean was afraid that they would make too much noise and damage the parts inside. "Don't. I'll do it myself. Don't damage it." Seeing that he didn't want to be polite, they immediately stopped. One of them looked at Bernard and laughed. "Little Bernard, you're too weak. You're so tired carrying a box." "Lil Bo is acting." Another young man laughed loudly. The veins on Bernard's arms bulged and his neck swelled. He gasped, "Don't make sarcastic remarks." They saw that the atmosphere wasn't as strange as it was at the beginning. One of them enthusiastically said to Dean, "Dean, congratulations! You are worthy to be the chosen one who won the Epoch Medal. You are able to create a 4-star item. Praise the God of Light." Dean looked at the person. It seemed that it was the first time they met. He modestly said, "It's a fluke." "Dean, what you said is wrong. You are the accumulation of knowledge. I saw you go to the library every day. Now you are able to create a 4-star item by yourself. It has nothing to do with luck." Another pretended to correct Dean. Dean smiled but didn't say anything. The crowd followed him all the way and praised him. One of them asked, "Dean, are you going to sell your 4-star crossbow to the Temple or Consortium?" The others looked at Dean with envy. If he sold it to the Temple, then he would immediately become a senior architect. If he sold it to the Consortium, it would be a huge fortune. Most of them, like Bernard, came from ordinary families in the commercial district. They relied on their own hard work to be selected into the Temple of Elements. Step by step, they climbed their way to where they were today. Even the nobles were envious of the wealth they could get from selling a top-grade 4-star item. For them, it was enough to let them enjoy a carefree life. They were completely free from the boring work of studying the divine arts. Dean looked at him. "I'll think about it." The young man's eyes lit up and said, "I suggest you sell to a consortium. As far as I know, the Green Consortium is not bad. They have deep financial resources and can certainly sell for a good price. If you need it, I will help you contact them." Dean smiled. "Do you have a relationship with the Green Consortium?" The young man saw the surprised looks on everyone's face and showed a bit of pride, saying, "My uncle lives with the Glinton family of the Glinton Financial Group. He is the coachman of the Glinton Patriarch. If my uncle is the middleman, the Glinton family will definitely pay a high price." Bernard laughed. "Dean's 4-star crossbow won't be able to sell for money even without your uncle's help." The youth's face turned red. "I'm sure I can sell it. But the price will be better if I have an acquaintance." Dean saw his thoughts and smiled. "Let's talk about this later." He picked up the boxes and entered the building. He saw an old figure coming down from the stairs. It was Henson. Henson also saw Dean and Bernard. He was surprised for a moment. He looked at Dean. "Are you going to make a new invention with so many boxes?" Dean nodded but didn't say anything. "Congratulations." Henson came over and said in a resentful tone. Dean smiled. It was a fluke. There was a trace of bitterness in Henson's eyes. He didn't say anything as he passed by Dean. The others saw that the dialogue between Henson and Dean was a bit strange. They had speculations in their hearts, but their faces didn't change. Dean was sent to the door of the room. He put all the suitcases back into the room. He politely declined them and closed the door. He looked for a pen and paper to draw the design drawings of the lightning rod. However, just as he was about to start on the draft, another guest came in. Dean didn't open the door but smelled a familiar smell. He opened the door and saw that it was Rosie who he had met a few days ago. She was wearing a black gauze dress. Her tall figure and low-cut dress made her look extremely sexy. She was full of the charm of a mature woman. "Mr. Dean." Rosie's eyes lit up as she saw Dean open the door. There was an eager smile on her face. "I haven't seen you for a long time. I'm here to bother you again." Dean smiled. "It's good that you know I'm bothering you." Chapter 261. Rosie giggled. "Mr. Dean, I took the liberty to come and disturb you mainly to congratulate you. You have just joined the Temple of Elements, and yet you have produced a top-grade 4-star invention. It's really admirable. We were misled by Master Kelt and thought that your work was a 3-star invention. I didn't expect Master Kelt to be wrong and underestimate your work." Dudian smiled. "I don't dare to say that it's amazing. Master Kelt didn't look at it in depth. He was able to give a 3-star evaluation. I admire his keen eyesight." Rosie looked at him deeply. "Mr. Dean didn't promise me before. It was a wise move. Otherwise I would have felt sorry. Fortunately, it's not too late now. Scott Consortium has decided to buy your military crossbow at the price of a 4-star quality product. What do you think, Mr. Dean?" "Quality product?" Dudian didn't expect her to directly give a higher price. "My work is only top grade. Your consortium will suffer a loss." "Businessmen don't make a loss." Rosie smiled in a natural and unrestrained manner. "It's just that the profit is a little less. This is also the sincerity of our Scott Consortium. Moreover, we have cooperated with Mr. Dean twice before, so we can be considered as old acquaintances. A little more preferential treatment is only right." Dudian glanced at her. Rosie was easy to make a good impression on people based on the way she spoke. But he wouldn't let go of the fact that the Scott Consortium had falsified the account. He pondered. I'll think about it. Rosie was surprised. Mr. Dean, are you not satisfied with it? Dudyan shook his head. I need to discuss this matter with old Foulin. After all, I was employed by his family as a hunter. His family bailed me out of prison and cleared my name. Although the terms of the hunter contract didn't require that my work belong to the Ryan family, but I have to repay this kindness. Rosie knew about Dudyan's experience. She was speechless as she didn't know what to say. She quickly thought, Mr. Dean, you should know more about the situation of the Ryan family than us. Even if you sell it to them at a lower price, they won't be able to mass produce it. In the end, they will have to find business partners to cooperate with them. If you sell it to us, then I can promise you that the profits of the crossbow will go to the Ryan family. Dudyan was surprised. He didn't expect the girl to have so much power that she could promise such a big concession on the spot. He pretended to ponder for a moment and said, Let's talk to old patriarch first so as to avoid being rude. Rosie didn't expect Dudyan to hesitate in the face of such conditions. Her face slightly changed. Her eyes flashed for a moment. In that case, if old Foulin agrees, then I ask Mr. Dean to consider our Scott consortium first. We can talk about the conditions later. If you need anything else, then you can tell me. I'll go back to the consortium and help you fight for it. You will absolutely be satisfied. Thank you. Dudyan thanked her. Rosie saw that Dudyan's face didn't change. She sighed in her heart. She knew that the matter was hanging by a thread. But she didn't admit defeat. After thinking for a moment, she said, Mr. Dean, please pass a word to old Foulin. If he agrees, then our Scott consortium is willing to form an alliance with the New World consortium. Dudyan's eyelids twitched. But he soon thought of a point. His heart calmed down. Alliance was certainly the most helpful thing for the New World consortium. But the Scott consortium's approach was to form an alliance with the New World consortium. If it was an unequal alliance, then the significance of the alliance would be greatly reduced. I'll pass the message to old Foulin, Dudyan said. Rosie sighed and suddenly thought of something. She whispered, By the way, I'll tell Mr. Dean the news that I just learned. The market in the Pine Cone town wasn't founded by the Melon Consortium. It was founded by the Bourong family alone. The purpose wasn't to target the New World Consortium but to target you. Moreover, they didn't use the economic monopoly of the Pine Cone market to suppress you. Instead, they used another insidious method to insult Mr. Dean's character. Insult? Dudyan's eyes moved as he looked at her. Rosie whispered, The Bourong family will find a rich businessman to help the Ryan family when the Pine Cone market monopolizes the economy of the nearby towns. They will use the Ryan family to get close to you. Then they will design a series of traps to trap you. As far as I know, you have a past with Miss Jenny of the Bourong family. The purpose of Rudolph's action is to discredit you and make his daughter completely give up on you. Dudyan was silent for a moment as he looked at her. Your Chai family's intelligence network is quite well informed. Rosie smiled. After all, we are enemies of the Melon Consortium. Naturally, we will pay more attention to them. Whether Mr. Dean is willing to sell the new item to the Scott Consortium or not, I'll pass on the news that they are going to frame you or suppress the New World Consortium. Dudyan looked at her. He had to say that this woman had commendable ability as she was sent to discuss business. Even though he had a knot in his heart due to the Scott Consortium falsifying the accounts, he couldn't help but be moved by her actions. However, he was no longer a weak child. He would return any kindness with kindness, not to mention that the other side was trying to fight for the final crossbow. Even if she was really kind, he would treat her coldly if she hindered his progress. The law of the jungle was the survival of the fittest. Thank you. Dudyan thanked her again. Rosie looked at him but didn't say anything. When she was about to leave, she suddenly saw a few black metal objects in the room behind the door. She was slightly startled. Mr. Dean, are you creating a new invention? Dudian saw that she had noticed the lightning rod but didn't care. Yes. Rosie was surprised. This seems to be metal. Aren't you a wood element architect? Why would you create a new invention using metal element? Dudian smiled. You will know after I create it. Rosie saw that Dudian didn't want to disclose. Mr. Dean, can I pre-order the new invention? I'll buy it at the price of a 3-star item. She regretted her words. Although Dudian had created a 4-star item, but who knew what the new invention would be? Even for many masters who had been famous for many years, they would usually only produce 1 or 2-star items. Occasionally, they would produce 3 or 4-star items. As for producing 5-star items, it was a rare thing for a master to do even once in a decade. Dudian shook his head. It's too low. If you give me the price of a 5-star item, then I can pre-order it to you. Rosie was stunned and immediately laughed twice. Mr. Dean, you are really humorous. Dudian shrugged. Rosie was helpless as she said goodbye to Dudian and left. Dudian closed the door after she left. He didn't expect that the purpose of the Pine Town market would be so deep. Although it was possible that Rosie made it up as he couldn't verify it, but the possibility was very low. Moreover, it was in line with the style of the Borong family. From an objective point of view, he could completely understand Rudolph's approach, but from his own point of view, he couldn't tolerate repeated violations. Melon Consortium, Borong family, Mel family. Dudian gently rubbed his fingers as he thought about the matter. That night, Dudian returned to the Ryan family by car. Old Fuline looked at Dudian in the study room. Rosie must be aware of your refusal. Did you tell her about the new textile machine? No. Dudian leaned on the sofa and rubbed his temples. It's meaningless to talk about the past. Yes. Old Fuline was relieved. There is no evidence. It's just our speculation. We won't get any compensation. Even if we get it, it will be because of the face of the crossbow. It's meaningless. Dudian rubbed his temples and closed his eyes. Is there any information from other consortia? In the afternoon, the Green Financial Group, Huasheng Financial Group, and even the military sent people over to discuss the matter of your crossbow. The price and conditions they offered were similar to Scott's. Now that the evaluation has been given, they can't lower the price. Now it's up to who can raise the price by how much. In addition, I've already inquired about it. Recently, the border battlefield has been busy with military supplies, and that group of barbarians is causing a ruckus again. Your crossbow can be considered lucky. During the war, I reckon that a small part of the reason why it was evaluated as a 4-star high-grade crossbow is because of this. Chapter 262. Border War. Dean was surprised. He had heard of these words before, but he didn't have time to understand them. Does it refer to the war inside the giant wall? Old Fuline nodded. The border mainly refers to the radiation zone outside the fortress. In the high radiation zone between the fortress and the giant wall, in addition to the monsters, there are some barbarians who have been expelled. They look similar to us, but their physique is huge. They call themselves ancestors, but we are used to calling them barbarians. In fact, they are no different from beasts. They drink blood and are bloodthirsty and warlike. They even eat babies of their own kind. They are extremely cruel. The barbarians have repeatedly invaded the territory. They want to invade the living areas and plunder resources. The duty of the army is to guard the fortress and resist the barbarians and monsters. Dean was startled as he heard Old Fuline's words. He didn't expect that there would be barbarians living in that desolate area. They call themselves ancestors. Do they mean the survivors of the previous era? Are they the descendants of the survivors who survived the disaster 300 years ago? Dean was puzzled, but all the people in the giant wall should be the descendants of the survivors. If they are the descendants of the survivors, they should be living a comfortable life. They should be in the center of the new era. How could they be expelled to the border? He thought for a moment but couldn't find a clue. 300 years wasn't a long time, but it wasn't a short time either. Perhaps the ancestors of the barbarians didn't directly trace back to the previous era. It was possible that they were eliminated during the struggle for power inside the giant wall. Are there a lot of barbarians? Dean asked Old Fuline. It should be very difficult to survive in the radiation zone. Moreover, if the radiation is too strong, then they will be sterilized. Why haven't they become extinct after such a long time of fighting? Old Fuline shook his head and sighed. Logically it should be so. But the fact is that the number of barbarians hasn't decreased but is increasing year by year. The military couldn't easily annihilate the barbarians by relying on the fortress to defend. The military is having a headache because of this matter. That's why in recent years the military didn't intervene in the secret transactions of other consortia. Dean slightly frowned. Didn't the Holy Church intervene in this matter? The Holy Church and the military are in the same boat. Naturally, they will help the military. But the Holy Church has to fight against the Dark Church. How can they allocate a large number of troops to reinforce the war at the border? Old Fuline sighed. In recent years the military has launched 6 forced conscription in the residential and slum areas. The people have been resentful. Only the commercial district is relatively peaceful. Dean thought, the Dark Church should know about this matter. The Temple of Elements prohibits human body research, but the Dark Church's alchemists don't. Perhaps the military has secretly commissioned the Dark Church's alchemists to help them find the secret of the increase in the number of barbarians. If the barbarians reproduce, then they must have evolved antibodies to resist high levels of radiation. If these antibodies are sold on a large scale, then it would be no less than a life-saving medicine for the people in the slums and residential areas. Moreover, this thing is also useful to me. I don't have a light physique. If the radiation value accumulates to more than 4 points, then the next time I go hunting, the accumulation of radiation value will increase rapidly. Even if I go outside the giant wall once or twice, the radiation value will soar to more than 10 points. The power of radiation will cause obvious damage to the body, such as skin deformation, body deformity, and even sterilization. I can only spend a lot of money to buy holy water from the Holy Church. If the barbarians really have antibodies to high radiation, then it will be an inexhaustible source of light holy water for me. I can even give myself the light physique. Dean's eyes lit up as he thought about it. Old Fuline saw that Dean was silent, so he didn't disturb him. After a moment Dean recovered and asked Old Fuline, "Did the Melon Consortium send us an invitation to buy the barbarians?" Old Fuline was surprised as he didn't expect Dean to suddenly jump to consortium matters. No. They should know that you and the Burong family don't have a good relationship, so they don't want to lose face. It should be more than that. Dean's eyes were deep as he said, "Perhaps they are ready to officially attack us." Old Fuline's face changed for a moment. He sighed. "Your fame is tantamount to giving them a warning. The best way to eradicate you in the cradle is to save resources. If they want to attack us, then the market of Pinetown is a good springboard. In addition, they can strangle our economy from the surrounding cotton industry. The yard town is in danger and the taxes are very low. We can only rely on the dividends of the new textile machine from the Scott Consortium and the crossbow that you sold to support us. But it's not a long-term solution." Dean looked at him. "If they want to attack us, then they won't start from the cotton industry. They won't start from the market of Pinetown and the yard town either. These are small industries. Even if they completely plunder them, it won't be enough to make 1/10 of the dividends of the new textile machine." Old Fuline's face slightly changed. "Do they want to start from the Scott Consortium? They are enemies. Will they join hands to deal with us? It's not surprising that the enemies will join hands if they can get rid of another eyesore. But the Scott Consortium won't join hands with them. Instead, they will take advantage of this opportunity to win us over. Dean's eyes were deep as he slowly said, "Old consortiums like the Mellon Consortium will use formal commercial competition to suppress us. The efficiency is too slow and it is difficult to directly dig out the root. If they use some dirty dark means to crush us, it would be as simple as crushing an ant." Old Foulin's eyelids twitched as his face turned ugly. This was the deepest worry in his heart. He was so worried that he didn't want to bring it up. But at the moment Dean said it out loud. He knew that it was inevitable. Formal commercial means couldn't help the Mellon Consortium to reach the point it was today. A consortium that stood above many rich businessmen didn't rely on pure financial resources. Instead, it relied on their connections and connections. They sent people to assassinate you last time. They won't use this method this time. If they want to assassinate me, then I'm just an old man. They can see that the consortium is relying on you. Moreover, the one who can threaten them is you, not me. Old Foulin slowly said after a moment of silence. Dean narrowed his eyes. There are too many means to deal with us. We can't guard against them one by one. So we don't need to guard against them. The best defense is offense. Old Foulin looked at him in surprise. We're going to attack? The Mellon Consortium? This was tantamount to hitting a stone with an egg. Dean slowly said, although the Mellon Consortium is a behemoth and indestructible for us. But the structure of the Mellon Consortium isn't a whole. We need a dagger to kill a person from the outside. But if we want to kill them from the inside, we only need to make them swallow a small rusty piece of iron. Moreover, we don't need to waste our physical strength. Old Foulin was startled. After a moment, he stared at him. Since you have anticipated this, then you must have made some plans and preparations. Tell me, how do you want me to cooperate with you? There was a touch of smile on Dean's face. I need you to help me find some helpers after I get the money. Helpers? Old Foulin was surprised. Where can I find them? Chapter 263. When Dean returned to his castle from the Ryan Castle, he saw an exquisite aristocratic carriage with a black serpent pattern on it. His eyes moved as he drove the carriage straight to his castle. A butler was standing outside the aristocratic carriage. He heard the sound of the wheels and immediately looked back. When he saw that it was Dean, his eyes lit up. He bent down and whispered to the person inside the carriage. A soft was heard from inside the carriage. The curtain was slowly lifted, revealing a gentle and beautiful face with the grace of a mature woman. Her jade-like eyes were gently sizing up the young man who was driving the carriage. What surprised her was that this young man was very different from what she had expected. He was not like a new star that had just risen from the east, high-spirited and vigorous. Instead, he was like a shadow in the depths of the darkness, calm and cold. It seemed that even the scorching heat of the Black Death season would cool down 3 feet around him. After a deep look, she slowly opened the door and got out of the carriage. She stood on the dry stone road. There was a white flower in front of her black shoes. Her soft black skirt was almost sticking to the ground. Her exposed snow-white ankles were amazing. She stood beside the door and quietly watched Dean slowly approaching. She softly said, "You are Mr. Dean. I took the liberty to disturb you." Dean had long noticed that the woman was dressed like a lady. She seemed to be in her 20s but dressed like a woman in her 30s. She had an elegant temperament. There was only a very faint smell of men on her body. It could be seen that she was a clean woman. She might even be a single woman. His eyes were calm as he calmly said, "Hello, what's the matter? Can we go to your castle to talk?" The woman asked in a gentle voice. Dean roughly guessed the purpose of her visit. If you want to talk about the purchase of the crossbow, please directly state the price. I will integrate the conditions put forward by the consortia and make the final choice. If you want to talk about future cooperation, I'm sorry but I don't plan to leave the New World Consortium. Granita didn't expect Dean to be so direct. She was startled for a moment but gently said, "Mr. Dean, I represent the Krulov Consortium. I want to talk about the above two things. In addition, I know that Mr. Dean has received kindness from the Ryan family. But the pattern of the Ryan family is only so big. When the sun rises in the sky, there will be thousands of feet of light. If the sun rises from the shoal, then the shoal will be the first target to be burned." She paused and continued, "What the Ryan family can give Mr. Dean, we can also give far more than them. So I hope Mr. Dean can consider it, because this is a good thing for you and the Ryan family." Dudian pulled the reins and stopped the carriage. He sat on the board and quietly looked at her. After a moment he slowly said, "If your consortium wants to have a closer relationship with me, then you have to cooperate with the New World Consortium. I will never withdraw from the New World Consortium." Granita was startled. She didn't expect that Dean wouldn't move even after she made it clear. She frowned. "Mr. Dean, the New World Consortium won't be able to accommodate you. Your existence will provoke an irresistible enemy for the New World Consortium. Moreover, the New World Consortium won't be able to protect you if you encounter trouble." Dean looked at her and slowly said, "I hope that the Krulov Consortium isn't one of the enemies of the New World Consortium." At the same time he said in his heart, "At least not now." When Granita heard his words, she sighed and said, "Since Mr. Dean is so determined, I won't force you. But please rest assured that the goodwill of the Krulov Consortium will always be there. We welcome you to join us at any time." Suddenly he thought of something. He took out an emerald card from the handbag and handed it to Dean. "This is my personal business card. It is also a VIP card for all the properties under my command. Please accept it as a thank you for the intrusion." Dean took it and glanced at the name, Granita. This name is a bit familiar. Dean's eyes slightly moved as he calmly put away the card. Granita sighed. There was still a bit of regret in her heart. She turned around and got into her carriage. Dean didn't continue to stay. He shook the rope and went past the vehicles to enter his castle. "Madam," the butler asked after Dean had left the carriage. "Is that it?" Granita whispered. "He will naturally come after the Melon Consortium or other consortiums. Let's go back." Dean calmed down after entering the castle. He sat in front of the desk in his room. He took out a piece of paper and began to draw new drawings. If he didn't have the fountain of life to heal his arm, then he would have considered making firearms. But now there was hope for his arm to recover, so he intended to continue the route of making cold weapons. As for firearms, they were far less of a threat to him. The destructive power of a bow and arrow would increase with the quality of the bow and the user's own physique. The higher the physique, the higher the lethality of the arrow. But firearms were constant. Ordinary people and senior hunters could use them, but the power was the same. He felt that once his physique reached the limit of a senior hunter, the destructive power of the arrows would not be inferior to bullets. It would even exceed the speed of most rifle bullets. As for the destructive power, he could use the previous idea of pouring mercury into the arrowhead to improve it. After reading the superchip, he found out that his unintentional idea coincided with an international banned bullet from the old era. This bullet was the Dum-Dum bullet. The Dum-Dum bullet had a terrifying destructive power. It was known as the bullet of death. The arrowhead was made based on the Dum-Dum bullet principle. The destructive power would exceed the firearms, so the production could be delayed. After all, if guns were to be invented and accidentally made by other consortiums or the Radiant Church, then mass-produce them, it would be like a thorn in the throat for hunters like them. They would be at the mercy of others, and they would completely lose their freedom and their deterrence. Moreover, the fall of the hunter profession was secondary. The magistrate would also lose its deterrent force in the face of firearms. Once the magistrate lost its deterrent force, the magistrate would be useless. It would no longer have the power to enforce the law. The giant wall would fall into chaos. Therefore, although it was easy to make a gun, but to eliminate the chain reaction brought by firearms was as difficult as ascending to the sky. He didn't want to live in fear all the time. He didn't want ordinary people to lurk around him and kill him. If the firearms were to be produced, then the pattern of the giant wall would completely evolve into an era where firearms determine the order. There would be rivers of blood and chaos in the struggle for power. Dean's eyes flashed. This was what he didn't want to see. He preferred to use the law of darkness to destroy the order and then create his own order. Gunpowder has been banned, as have other items with great destructive power. However, these items are far inferior to firearms. There are too many factors required for gunpowder to explode, which greatly limits the threat of gunpowder. That's why it didn't cause chaos. Dean gently tapped the table with the pen. The accumulation of wealth is enough if there is a lightning rod in a short period of time. If we immediately create other things, then it will arouse suspicion. Moreover, the momentum of the rise will be so fast that all the consortiums will be afraid of us. It will destroy ourselves. The next step is to consider the force of the consortium. At present, there are no senior hunters in the consortium. This is one of the reasons why the other consortiums despise us. A senior hunter is enough to make the other consortiums a little afraid. It is equivalent to the nuclear weapons of the old era. If the consortium's wealth is suppressed or they are forced into a desperate situation by other means, then they can send senior hunters to assassinate the enemy. Although the senior hunters can't escape the magistrate's hunt, but it will give the other consortiums some deterrence. No one is willing to exchange their life with the hunter's life. Dean secretly thought. If the number of hunters is enough, then the other consortiums won't dare to easily offend them. With the current financial resources, it is difficult to go to the regular hunter school to attract new hunters. Moreover, they have to buy magic marks for them. The cost is too high. I can only rely on hunting outside the giant wall to be self-sufficient. Thinking of this, he immediately began to draw the blueprint. Time passed. 2 days passed. The military crossbow storm hadn't dissipated in the consortiums and the Temple of Elements. In these 2 days, in addition to the Melon Consortium, the other 5 consortiums all looked for Dean or Old Fooling. They wanted to buy the crossbow. The military also looked for Dean and offered a price that was nearly 1/3 higher than the other consortiums. After careful selection and discussion with Old Fooling, Dean finally chose the Huasheng Consortium. Considering the next plan of cleaning outside the giant wall, if he had Huasheng Consortium's map, it would naturally be twice the result with half the effort. However, Dean and Old Fooling didn't let go of this opportunity to make a big profit. They blackmailed Huasheng Consortium almost to the bottom line. In addition to the map being a free gift, the price was raised to the price of a 4-star quality map. Moreover, Ryan family had shares in several industries of Huasheng Consortium. They could get regular dividends and have the right to decide the direction of these industries. The contract was finally signed and both sides were happy. Dean and Old Fooling knew that although it seemed that the other side had been greatly optimized during the negotiations, but for Huasheng Consortium, these industries seemed to be important. In fact, they could be abandoned at any time. Moreover, they wouldn't lose even half a share of the profits of the consortium. In case of a falling out, they could use some methods to kick Old Fooling out of the board of directors and cut off the dividend. 460,000 gold coins. Old Fooling repeatedly counted the numbers. His wrinkled face bloomed. Even though he had witnessed the glory of the Ryan family in his youth, he had never seen such a large amount of savings. If he wasn't psychologically prepared, he would have lost control of himself on the spot. Dudian smiled. This was the value of an architect. It was also the charm of a 4-star military item. If it was a 1-star item, then it could be sold for thousands of gold coins. If it was a 2-star item, then it could be sold for 6,000 to 10,000 gold coins. 3-star items were much higher. At least 50,000 to 100,000 gold coins were sold for 3-star items. His crossbow was not only a top-grade item but also a top-grade one. Moreover, it was sold at the peak of 4-star level during the border war. Moreover, 5-star items were worth millions of gold coins. Each one of them was a must-have item for the aristocracy. They were spread to the 3 regions as well as the inner wall. The profits were innumerable. Our background is comparable to that of the aristocracy. Old Foulin sighed with emotion. Their wealth was close to that of the Milan family. But in terms of contacts and industry, they still couldn't be compared with the Milan family. The latter's real estate wealth could easily kill the Milan family's savings. Dudyan smiled. This money is enough to redeem people. More than enough. It's more than enough. Old Foulin smiled. You shouldn't go outside the giant wall in the future. Wait until you buy the fountain of life to cure your arm. Then you can stay inside the giant wall and study the invention. If you can make a military crossbow, then we will have a complete turnaround. Old Foulin was happy to hear this. Dudyan smiled. Money is useful if you spend it. If you don't spend it, or if others don't give you the opportunity to spend it, then it's just a string of numbers. Hunters are the foundation of a consortium. It's too difficult for us to catch up with other consortia. But it's much easier to cultivate a few senior hunters. Old Foulin turned to look at him. Are you going to become a senior hunter and assassinate the people of the Melon Consortium? Dudyan smiled. Do I look like such a stupid person? That's good. Old Foulin was relieved. If you assassinate the senior members of the consortium, then it will inevitably cause a collective panic. They will use all their connections to get the magistrate involved in the investigation. It will be difficult to guarantee that you will be able to escape. Even if you assassinate the senior members of the consortium, it won't destroy the Melon Consortium. Their business empire is supported by countless mainstays. Even if the top members of the consortium fall, it won't collapse in a short time. Even if it collapses, it will become a pile of fat meat which will be quickly eaten by other consortiums. Dudyan shrugged his shoulders. Of course he knew about this. Otherwise he would have assassinated the senior members of the Melon Consortium like how he assassinated Deacon Huey. After all, this wasn't a world where power was supreme. Unless he mastered nuclear weapons, or he was stronger than a senior hunter. But so far he didn't know whether the senior hunter was the limit of human evolution or not. Therefore, if one wanted to destroy such a giant financial group, one would have to rely on commercial suppression, and commercial suppression would also involve various industries. The other party was like a towering tree that had been growing for decades. Its branches and leaves were dense, and its roots had also penetrated in all directions. If one wanted to uproot it, one would have to pull all its roots out of the soil. The amount of effort needed was self-evident. However, a consortium was the product of decades of operation of dozens of families. It was the condensation of countless wisdom and painstaking efforts of several generations. It was extremely difficult for a single person to overthrow a consortium. It was no less than the uprising of the common people in the old era. The same day, Dudyan returned to the Temple of Elements. He spent about 30,000 gold coins to find a senior god to buy a bottle of Fountain of Life. He owed the senior god a favor. The Fountain of Life was stored in a small glass bottle. The liquid was green and full of vitality. Dudyan shook it a few times. He felt that it was mucus. He was curious as he didn't know what was used to make it. But it was different from buying drinks in the old era. There was certainly no formula or raw materials written on it. Even if he inquired about it, it would be very difficult to know. Moreover, the Temple of Elements would notice it. Chapter 264. Dean followed the instructions and unscrewed the cap. He poured the water on his left arm and smeared it evenly with his hand. He felt that the smell of the fountain of life was like the juice of flowers and plant. At the same time, there was a very obscure smell of blood. It was difficult for ordinary people to smell it. In addition to the smell of blood, there was a little rotten smell. The volatile odor particles were even rarer. Even he needed to carefully sniff to find it. If ordinary people have knife or sword wounds, they only need to smear it on the wound. The fountain of life will stimulate the rapid metabolism of the necrotic flesh and blood. New flesh and blood will grow and heal the wound. A bottle of fountain of life can be used more than 10 times. Dean poured out half of the bottle and smeared a layer of it on all parts of his left arm, including his fingers. It looked like a layer of oil, exuding a strong fragrance. Looking at the quiet absorption and volatilization of the fountain of life on his left arm, Dean was a little worried. Although he could burst out with power beyond his physical strength without feeling, but the damage to his body was also great. Moreover, in the fierce battle, it was difficult to control the weight. This was extremely fatal in close combat. In the future, he could either completely give up close combat and specialize in long-range archery, or he could wait until his left arm recovered and immediately strengthen the control and exercise of his left arm. When his left arm was unconscious, he could still control the strength to a fine degree. If I only practice archery, I can improve quickly. But archery is mainly for hunting outside the giant wall. If I am assassinated inside the giant wall or in a head-on confrontation, I still have to rely on close combat. Dean thought of many hidden dangers. He secretly decided to strengthen the exercise as soon as his arm recovered. 3 days later. Doctor, are you sure that the bones have completely healed? Will there be any hidden injuries left inside? Dean looked at the middle-aged man and his assistant, a 15 or 16-year-old girl. These two were the ones who had treated his arm in the past. The middle-aged man was concentrating on suturing Dean's left arm. His head was full of sweat. When he heard Dean's question, he answered without lifting his head, "I have checked. The bones are hard and the cracks are completely healed. As long as you continue to recuperate for a period of time, you can completely recover. But it is recommended not to do strenuous activities in the near future." Dudian nodded. If an ordinary person wanted to confirm whether their arm had recovered or not, they could roughly understand by the feeling of pain. But he couldn't feel it, so he could only ask the doctor to skin his arm and see the bones. As a result, the arm would inevitably be traumatized. But the wound caused by the surgery was an external injury. Soon, the middle-aged man completely sutured Dean's arm. He put the blood-stained gloves and needles back into the operating box, exhaled lightly, wiped the sweat on his forehead, and looked up at Dean, only to find that the teenager's expression was calmer than his. Although he had been injected with anesthetic, so he would not feel pain, he was not frightened by the bloody scene of the surgical dissection. He secretly smiled bitterly, got up and said, "Don't touch water with your left hand recently. If you feel itchy, please be sure to resist scratching it to avoid infection. I will come over regularly for anti-inflammatory and examination. If there are other abnormalities, you can inform me immediately." "All right." Dean leaned on the bed. "Thanks for your hard work. Take care." The middle-aged man smiled, picked up the suitcase, and left the room with the girl who was looking at Dean in surprise. The next day, Dean's left hand was wrapped in bandages and fixed on his shoulder. He went to the room on the second floor of the Ryan Castle. After dispersing the servants, Dean looked at old Foulin. "Have the procedures been completed?" "Yes." Old Foulin took out a stack of bulging envelopes from the drawer. "Everything is in here. The people you want haven't escaped, so it's easy to bail them out. Now you just need to go and pick them up." Dean nodded and took the stack of envelopes. "I'll go. It's too far for you." Old Foulin glanced at his arm. "Your hand, it's healed. Just waiting for the stitches to be removed." Dudian smiled as he put the letter into his arms. He turned around and went downstairs. Old Foulin escorted him to the carriage that the butler had brought. He waved to old Foulin and ordered the coachman to set off. In the frontier of the commercial district, there was a low-lying hidden place. The periphery was covered with thorns and weeds, and in the depths of the jungle was a plain with lush green grass. In the middle of the plain stood an ancient castle that was more than 10 meters high. Outside the castle was a spacious blue lake that reflected the silver-gray radiation clouds in the sky and the blue sun. This was the first prison of Sylvia, Thorn's Flower Prison. Warden Jones and Butler Peter were standing on the balcony in a gorgeous office on the top floor of the prison. They were looking at the thorns and flowers at the end of the plain outside the lake. Jones whispered, "Do you remember the kid who escaped from here?" Peter smiled. "I don't think the people in this prison will forget him." Jones didn't know whether he was happy or angry. "Do you remember how long it has been since he escaped?" 2 quarters. Peter faintly guessed something. "I heard that he joined the New World Consortium established by the Ryan family. Are they the guarantors of the 5 dirty pigs that were bailed out today?" Jones nodded slightly as his eyes flashed. The Bourong family had sent this kid to prison. But they weren't able to kill this kid in 2 seasons. Instead, he was sent to the Temple of Elements created by the Holy Church. It can be seen that we made a big mistake. This kid should have the strength of an intermediate hunter when he was sent to prison. In fact, he should have the strength of a senior hunter. Peter was startled but soon understood why Jones had such an inference. If he didn't have such strong strength, then he would have been killed by the Bourong family. Wasn't he just 13 years old when he was sent to the prison? Peter couldn't help but ask. Although he was in his 50s, but he remembered every criminal that had been sent to the prison. Jones nodded slightly. His eyes were deep as he said, "He has such strength at the age of 13. The Bourong family didn't know that this kid is extremely patient and good at disguising himself. If the Bourong family doesn't get rid of this kid as soon as possible, then maybe in the next 10 years, they will fall in the hands of this kid." Bid was surprised. "No way. Bourong family has been in business for several generations. Their businesses are spread across all walks of life. This kid is cunning and deep, but in front of a colossus like Bourong family, he won't be able to do anything. If he is smart, he will reconcile with Bourong family, otherwise, reconciliation is impossible." Jones whispered, "Don't you know what kind of life is like in the prison? If this kid becomes a senior hunter, then the Bourong family will be in danger." Peter nodded. "It's too difficult to become a senior hunter. Moreover, it's hard to predict the life of a senior hunter. Even a senior hunter has an amazing chance of dying outside the giant wall. In front of a monster, no matter what kind of conspiracy or trick is useless." Jones saw a small black dot slowly appear outside the plane. He whispered, "It's coming." Dean lifted the curtain and looked around the plane. He recalled the rainy day when he escaped from here. His whole body was wet and he had to stick to the grass to escape from here. After a moment the carriage came to the front of the lake. "Stop. Please show your proof," the guard at the bridge shouted. If he hadn't seen the noble flag on Dean's carriage, then he would have destroyed the carriage as soon as it was detected by the watchtower. Dean opened the door and got out of the carriage. He took out the letter from his arms and handed it to the guard. The jailer took it and opened it. After a moment, he looked at Dean and said, "Come with me. Don't look around on the way." Then he took Dean along the corridor to the prison. Dean stepped on the road and looked at the lake on both sides of the stone road. There were more than 10 meters long shadows swimming in the lake. If someone fell into it, even if he was a senior hunter, most of them would be dismembered and die tragically. Suddenly he felt someone was watching him. He looked up and saw 2 figures standing on the balcony of the top floor of the prison. The first one was a middle-aged man in black clothes. He had thick eyebrows and a cold temperament. Behind him was an old man with white hair. He had a gentle expression, but his eyes were faintly sharp. Dean guessed that these two should be the warden and his servant of the Thornflower prison. Chapter 265. Dean retracted his eyes and followed the jailer. The things in the lake on both sides of the stone path felt the movement and gathered on both sides of the stone path. From time to time, huge waves surged out from the lake. Dean's expression was as usual as he came to the gate of the prison. The guard said a few words to the guard and handed out the letter given by Dean. The guard looked at the letter and opened the door. He looked at Dean indifferently and didn't say a word. "Please," the jailer said to Dean and led the way. The hall behind the door was as lively as a pub. Many jailers were sitting in the hall drinking tea and chatting. Most of the topics revolved around prisoners and women. Several jailers who were sitting outside the hall noticed Dean. Their eyes flashed with excitement. But when they saw that Dean's hands and feet were not shackled, their excitement turned into surprise. One of the jailers blinked. He felt that the clean and gentlemanly teenager was familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen him before. "Crazy ol', someone has come to bail someone out," the jailer who was leading the way shouted to the counter behind the hall. The middle-aged jailer who was playing cards with several jailers behind the counter heard the shout. He looked up and the others who were playing cards also looked over. One of them was surprised when he saw Dean. This kid, Black Chicken, do you know him?" another jailer asked. Black Chicken rubbed his eyes and looked carefully. He suddenly shouted, "Isn't this the kid who escaped from our prison?" The jailers were stunned when they heard his words. They carefully looked at Dean and suddenly burst into an uproar. "No wonder I felt a bit familiar. It's him on the wanted poster. F***CK. This kid actually dared to come back. He went out for a walk and dressed like a dog. I almost didn't recognize him." The middle-aged crazy ol' looked at Dean for a moment. He put the cards in his hand into the back pocket of his trousers. He got up and walked towards Dean. He looked down at the teenager in front of him and said, "Kid, your surname is Dew, right?" Dean bowed his head and smiled. Suddenly, he kicked the middle-aged man's knee. The knee was one of the hardest bones in the human body, but at this moment, the middle-aged man's knee was bent backward. At the same time, the middle-aged man's body leaned forward and fell toward Dean. Dean lifted his right hand to support his falling body. "Welcome back. You don't have to be so courteous." As soon as he finished his words, his palm subtly moved down. The middle-aged man didn't have time to stand firm, and suddenly fell down. Dean also moved sideways to avoid the fall. He quietly looked at the middle-aged man who fell at his feet, as if he was looking at an ant. The sudden change shocked the jailers. They didn't expect that Dean would dare to beat the jailers in the prison. Moreover, the middle-aged man was not an ordinary jailer. He was the supervisor of the first floor of the prison. He belonged to a small level in the entire prison. "Stop! Brat, do you want to break the law?" All the jailers stood up from their chairs and shouted at Dean. Dean slowly looked up and glanced at the crowd. "It seems that your food is not good. Are you so hungry that you can't even stand firm? Bastard, it's your sneak attack. Attack the jailer. You are dead. Inform the knight of the magistrate that someone has broken into the prison." One of the jailers turned around and ran out from the side door. Apparently he was going to inform the guards. Dean smiled and walked towards a nearby table. The three jailers who were standing at the table and glaring at Dean saw him coming over. Their faces changed and they hurriedly retreated. Their movements were too big and their feet tripped over the chair. Dean didn't look at the three of them. He bent down and grabbed the chair that was overturned on the ground. He patted the dust on it and sat down. After a moment, the sound of iron boots echoed. The door that had just been closed was pushed open again. A jailer with more than a dozen knights of the magistrate rushed in. They quickly found Dean sitting on the chair. The jailer immediately said, "It's him. He attacked the jailers. Prepare to break into the prison." The team of knights of the magistrate looked at Dean and the middle-aged man who had climbed up from the ground. Their faces changed. The young captain pulled out his sword from his waist. The other team members got the order and also pulled out their swords. More than a dozen shining swords were held high in the hall. They were pointing at Dean, who was sitting on the chair. Dean smiled. "Are you sure you want to listen to one side of the story and arrest me?" The young captain's face was cold. Did he hurt his leg by himself? Dean shrugged. "Maybe it's true?" "Nonsense!" The young captain shouted. "You attacked the jailer. I advise you to surrender. If you resist, then your crime will increase." Dean smiled. "You said that I hurt him. You didn't see it with your own eyes. You didn't ask him. How can you directly convict me?" The young captain's face was cold as he looked at the middle-aged man next to him. "Crazy old man, did he hurt you?" "It's him. It's him." The middle-aged crazy old man held the table next to him and moved towards the young captain. He pointed at Dean and roared, "It's this kid! He attacked me! Damn it! Kill him!" The young captain stared at Dean coldly. "Now what do you have to say?" Dean shrugged. "Nothing to say." "Well, cuff him." The young captain waved his hand. "I have something to say." Suddenly, a gentle and dignified voice sounded from the back of the hall. An old man dressed like a butler came down the stairs. When the prison guards saw the old man, they were shocked and hurriedly bowed their heads and said, "Greetings, butler." Peter ignored the guards on both sides and went straight to Dean. He looked at the middle-aged man next to the young captain. "How can you falsely accuse Mr. Dean of breaking your leg?" The middle-aged man was stunned. The guards were stunned and looked at each other in blank dismay. The young captain was startled and couldn't help but frown. Peter glanced at the crazy middle-aged man with a hint of warning. He turned to the young man and said, "It's just a misunderstanding. You all can leave now. Mr. Dew is here to bail someone out. How can he break the prison?" The young captain looked at Dean, who was sitting next to him, and then looked at the old man. He was silent for a moment and bowed. "Yes." Then he put his sword back into the scabbard and turned away. After the young man left, Crazy Ole suddenly felt that the temperature around his body had decreased a lot, and the air had become a little cold. He could not help but say to Peter, "Butler, it was this kid just now, huh?" Peter glanced at him. The old captain's face slightly changed and he immediately shut up. Peter turned to look at Dean. There was a gentle smile on his face. "Mr. Dean, you are now an architect of the Temple of Elements. Every move you make represents the will of the God of Light. Why bother with these small characters?" Dean indifferently smiled. "I can't rub sand in my eyes." Peter's eyes lit up. "Mr. Dean, the person you want to bail is inside. Shall I show you the way?" "Don't bother." Dean stood up and dusted. "I'm familiar with the road here." He went towards the side door of the hall. There was an iron lock on the door. He gently pulled it and the lock broke. He gently pushed the door open and went inside. The guards' faces changed as they saw Dean break the lock of the door so easily. They looked at Peter in awe as Dean's figure disappeared from their sight. Crazy Ole's face changed as he gritted his teeth. "Butler, I'm also a member of the prison. It doesn't matter if I'm injured, but the one who will lose face is—" Peter coldly snorted and said, "You know that you represent the prison and be smarter. Don't cause trouble for the prison. If you really catch him, he will probably be released on the same day before his but warms up. At that time, he will have the right to sue you for slandering and framing him. At that time, the one who will be locked up will be you. Do you think your power is greater or his?" Crazy Ole was startled. "Butler, this kid, you pieces of trash, use the time you have to play cards to read more newspapers and wipe your feces-clogged brains." Peter's eyes were cold. He didn't look like a housekeeper at all. After he finished speaking, he turned around and left, going upstairs along the stairs behind the hall. The frozen atmosphere in the hall gradually melted after Peter left. Everyone looked at each other. Suddenly, one of the short guards exclaimed, "I remember! Isn't that kid called Dean? The news about him has been in the newspaper every day. He is an architect from the Temple of Elements. He has won the Epic Medal. Oh my God! What? Everyone was shocked as they heard the short guard's words. Crazy Ole was stunned. He didn't like to read the newspaper. Although he had occasionally heard about it from other guards, he didn't associate the two names together. One was a hunter who had committed a crime and was imprisoned in the prison. The other was an architect from the Temple of Elements. The difference was like the difference between the sun and the night. How could they be the same person? Thinking of Butler Peter's words, he suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. His heart was so cold that he even forgot the pain in his feet. He secretly rejoiced and felt a lingering fear. If he had really arrested such a person, he reckoned that he would really end up like Butler Peter said, being sued and thrown into prison. Chapter 266. Dean went down the wooden stairs and saw the torture room. A young jailer was sitting behind the counter next to the stairs. He was reading a book with withered pages. Dean was separated by 6 or 7 meters, but he could clearly see the words on the book. It was a book about love between men and women. The language was explicit and obscene. Dean frowned slightly. The young jailer heard the footsteps and put his hand on the book to cover his eyes. He thought that it was his colleague who had come down to play. But he saw a strange teenager. He was surprised for a moment. He saw that Dean was from outside the prison. His eyes flashed with excitement. He folded the book and stuffed it into the drawer. He got up and grabbed a snake whip from the counter. He looked at Dean and found that there were no handcuffs on Dean's body. Moreover, there were no knights escorting him. "Who are you?" The young jailer slightly frowned but didn't rush to start. Dean glanced at him. "I'm here to bail someone out." Bail someone out? The young jailer suddenly thought of today's notice. He didn't expect that the person who had the ability to bail out a criminal would turn out to be such a teenager. But maybe the other party was just an errand boy? He put away the whip and took out the key from his waist. "Come with me." He went down the stairs and opened the heavy iron gate of the first floor of the prison. Dean entered and saw that the layout was still the same. The familiar corridor, dim light, and steel cages, as well as the stench of urine and human dirt in the air. At a glance, he saw many familiar faces. "Number 23, someone has come to bail you out." The young jailer came to the long corridor, and the baton in his hand clanked against the prison cages until it stopped in front of a dark cage, and he shouted inside. The entire prison fell into a brief silence as the young jailer's words fell. The next moment an uproar broke out. "Bail! It's bail again! I've seen it twice this year. Can I be bailed out after entering here? Please, Elder, bail me out too. I'm willing to dedicate all my loyalty to you. Sir, please bail me out too." While everyone was in shock, some of the prisoners in the cages closer to the iron gate had noticed Dean. They immediately stretched out their hands to him for help. They poured all their feelings into pleading. Dean quietly watched as he walked to the front of the cell where the young jailer was standing. He saw a shocked blonde youth sitting inside. There were 4 prisoners next to him. They didn't expect that their boss would be bailed out. "Gene, don't you recognize me?" Dean smiled. The blonde youth in the cage looked at the figure that blocked the light. He tried to search his mind for the people he knew in the past. But there was no such face. He was surprised. Do you know me?" Dudian smiled. "It hasn't been long since I escaped from here. Have you forgotten about me so soon?" Prison break. The blonde youth's pupils shrank as he heard Dean's words. "You are Dean?" Dean was Dean's code name in prison. Hearing the words of the blonde young man, the people in the other cages who were constantly reaching out their hands to beg suddenly became silent. They looked at the tall, handsome young man in astonishment. This was Du Ho, who had escaped from the prison previously. The young jailer was stunned as he looked at the youth. He had heard about the only person who had escaped from Thornflower Prison in the last 50 years. But he wasn't assigned to supervise the prisoners, so he didn't recognize Dean. He didn't expect that the legendary figure would be standing in front of him. He dared to come back after escaping from here? Why would he bail out the people who were in prison together with him? The young jailer was stunned on the spot. Dean smiled. Is there anyone else who has crossed the prison after me? The blond youth had seen Dean's appearance through the faint light from the top of the wall. Although there were differences, but the eyes and lips were exactly the same. Especially the tone of voice and smile. He laughed as he grabbed the bars of the cage. Of course not. You are the most ruthless person I have ever seen in my life. The people in the other cages also reacted and became agitated. Do your back. Bail us out. We are all acquaintances. Bail me out too. All the cages were begging for mercy. Dean slightly raised his hand. Everyone was looking at him. They didn't dare to provoke him. I'm only here to bail out 5 people. Dean calmly said. It's not easy to bail you out. I need to ask the nobles to come forward and pay about 50,000 gold coins. 50,000 gold coins? The people in the cages were shocked. Except for a few individuals, most of them had never seen tens of thousands of gold coins in their lives. Like the middle-aged man nicknamed Fat Pig in the first cage. He used to be a rich businessman, but at most he had assets of 10 or 20,000 gold coins. 50,000 gold coins was an astronomical figure for them. Please do a good deed. Some of them reacted and immediately begged Dean. Although they knew that the amount of 50,000 gold coins was not easy to come up with, and Dean was not related to them, the possibility of him taking out 50,000 gold coins for them was very low, but at the moment they could only continue to beg to win a glimmer of hope. Dean slightly raised his hand to interrupt the crowd. Everyone, the number of people who will be bailed out has been decided. If we raise the money in the future, we will naturally bail you out. As for who will be bailed out first, we will talk about it later. Everyone looked at each other and didn't dare to speak anymore. The young jailer's eyelids twitched. He felt that his heart was bleeding for using 50,000 gold coins to bail out these garbage. Dean glanced at him and signaled with his eyes. The young guard understood the meaning of Dudien's words. He quickly took out the key to open the cage. He looked at the blond youth. Come out. Lord Dean has come to bail you out. He is really loyal. Then he looked at Dudien in a flattering way. The blond youth had just stepped out of the cage when he heard the jailer's words. He couldn't help but look at the youth in front of him. Looking at the faint smile on the youth's face under the light, he suddenly felt as if his chest was blocked by something. He pinched his nose hard, clenched his fist, and heavily pounded his chest where his heart was. He took a deep breath and said in a low voice, You let me regain my freedom. I know that you bailed me out not because of our past relationship, but because you need me. Don't worry, I will devote the rest of my life to you. Dudien didn't care. I believe you. The blond youth lowered his head. His shoulders trembled. Dean turned and walked towards the corridor. The blond youth immediately followed him. The young jailer quickly locked the cage again, and quickly caught up with Dean. He smiled. The second one is number 36. He is here. He trotted to the front of a cage and said to the person inside, Number 36, get up. Someone has bailed you out. There was a burly youth standing in the dark cage. He had already stood up from the straw mat. He had a complex look on his face as he looked at the youth who was walking freely outside the cage. His body shook as he heard the young jailer's words. He felt a rush of blood from the soles of his feet to his brain. Although he wanted to open his mouth to beg, he didn't. He didn't expect to hear that he was one of the 5 people who had been bailed out. Chapter 267. Scar. Jean was pleasantly surprised as he looked at the burly youth in the cage. They were one of the few friends in the prison. He didn't expect to be bailed out by Dean at the same time. Dean came to the front of the cage and looked at the burly man who used to live in the next cage. "Old Scar, come out." "Dean." Scar looked at him with a complex expression. The sudden surprise caught him off guard. It was as if he was in a dream. He quickly came out of the cage and said to Dean, "Thank you." Dean smiled. "It won't be easy to get out of here. You have to be mentally prepared." Scar's expression turned serious. "I'm willing to do anything as long as I can get out of this damn place." Dean nodded. "You will bleed but never cry if you follow me." Scar deeply stared at him. "I believe in you." Dean smiled. "Let's go and find our other 3 partners. They are in the prison below." Below? Jean and Scar were startled. At this time, the people in the surrounding cages were in a commotion as they heard Dean's words. "Dean, don't go. Dean, take me with you. I beg you. Bail me out. I'll do whatever you want me to do." Dean's footsteps slightly paused as he heard the voices of the crowd. He suddenly thought of something. He looked at Scar. A few months ago, wasn't there a young man who claimed to be from the Milan family? A few months ago? Scar thought for a moment and nodded. "There is such a person," he shouted as soon as he came in. He seemed to have mentioned the word Milan. It didn't take long for this person to be released on bail. He even implicated Pig, who lived in the same prison. He was skinned and executed. Pig blamed himself for being too hungry. He didn't investigate clearly before acting recklessly. "Dean, is this person your friend?" Dean's eyes lit up. "He is an enemy." Scar and Jean looked at each other. Jean immediately said, "If we knew that he was your enemy, we would have let Pig kill him. Even if his family came to bail him out, they would only be able to bail out a corpse. It's all in the past. There will still be opportunities in the future." Dean waved his hand and looked at the 2 rows of cages. "As I said before, all of you want to be bailed out. But the quota is limited and there is an order. How should he choose? I will filter through everyone's resume and performance in prison. If there's something I like, I will give it priority. So, everyone, please do your best in prison." After that, he gestured to the young prison guard to lead the way. The young jailer glanced at him with apprehension and said nothing, silently leading the way. Scar and Jean followed behind Dean. They left the corridor in the middle of the prison and went to the bottom of the prison. After a moment, Dean came to the 2nd floor of the prison. There were 4 young jailers sitting in a small room outside the prison. They were playing cards and drinking. They stood up when they saw Dean, Scar and Jean. One of the young jailers quickly ran to the pillar and grabbed the string of the bell. The young jailer didn't wait for him to shake the bell. He said in a hurry, "Don't be nervous. This is Mr. Dean. He came to bail out the prisoners." One of the 4 young jailers recognized the young man leading the way and asked in bewilderment, "Do you have proof?" The young man looked at Dean. "Mr. Dean." Dean took out the letter from his arms and handed it out. "The warden is guarding outside. Do you need to worry about me sneaking in?" The 4 young jailers quickly opened the letter and looked at it. They took back the letter and handed it back to Dean. "All right, come with me. Remember not to talk nonsense." They opened the heavy iron door and led the way. "Mr. Dean, you should follow him." The young man who led the way stopped at the door. Dean nodded and followed the brown-haired youth. It was a long and dark passage. It was more than 10 meters long. There was a huge round iron door at the end of the passage. There were 2 knights of the magistrate in front of the door. Dean glanced at the prison. Although the Thornflower prison belonged to the military, but it seemed to have a cooperative relationship with the magistrate. "Open the door," the brown-haired jailer said. The 2 knights of the magistrate looked at Dean, Jean and Scar. They slightly frowned but didn't say anything. They opened the door. As the round iron door was opened, loud cheers came out from inside. Wild laughter spread into the passage. "What are these madmen doing?" The brown-haired jailer's face sank. He pulled out the baton from his waist and went in. Dean, Jean and Scar were curious. They had been here for several years but had never been to the second layer of the prison. They had heard from the old people on the first layer that there were some vicious people. They followed the brown-haired jailer to the gate. The structure of the prison was different from the first layer. It wasn't a straight corridor but a circular hall. There were cages around the walls. Each cage was separated by a few meters from each other. There was only one person in each cage. At the moment, wild laughter and cheers came out from the cages. At the same time, there were 2 cages in the 10 o'clock direction. From time to time, there were bang sounds mixed with laughter. Dudian stared and saw that there were 2 people in the shadows of the cages. One of them was tall and sturdy, nearly 2 meters in height. The other one was thin and had very long hair that was draped over his body like a woman. At the moment, the source of the bang sounds was that the 2 prisoners were hitting their heads against the iron pillars in front of them. Old Jean and Scar were stunned by the scene. Dean's eyes lit up as he looked at the other cages. The brown-haired jailer roared as he saw the 2 prisoners hitting their cages. 2 bastards! Do you want to die? Stop! Yo! Look, this idiot brought 3 newbies over. Ha! There was a burst of laughter as they pointed at Dean and the other 2. The brown-haired jailer's baton hit the cage. The sound of metal covered the sound of the 2 heads hitting each other. He waved the baton and hit the cage in front of them. He roared, Stop! Stop! If you don't stop, I will give you 3 needles. The 2 prisoners who were still hitting their heads stopped when they heard the word 3 needles. They looked at each other. The burly man's head was full of blood but he didn't care. He grinned. Little devil, I have 137 needles. You lose. Humph. The man's hair was very long. He looked like a woman. He snorted and spoke in a very neutral male voice. If this fool didn't stop us, we would have continued. Let's see who will laugh in the end. A loss is a loss, ha! The burly man laughed. The brown-haired youth's face turned ugly. He ignored the 2 and turned back to Dean and the other 2. Which number do you want to bail? Dean pointed to the deepest 12 o'clock direction. Number 7. The brown-haired youth was startled. His face changed as he whispered, Show me the document. Dean smiled as he saw the fear in the youth's face. He handed the document to him again. Don't worry, I'm here. He won't hurt you. The brown-haired youth was embarrassed. He quickly glanced at the document to confirm the prisoner number. His face turned gloomy. Come with me. He took Dean to the 12 o'clock direction. The laughter and discussion quieted down. Someone shouted, Bail? Did I just hear bail? It's bail. Number 7 is bailed. Chapter 268. Dean didn't pay attention to the noise around him. He came to the deepest part of the cage. He saw a skinny old man leaning against the wall. His linen clothes were very clean. The old man didn't participate in the previous laughter and cheers. It was as if he was isolated from the world. He just quietly leaned against the wall. Dudian knew that he had been observing him from the moment he entered the room. Number 7, someone has come to bail you out. The brown-haired youth stopped 2 meters away from the cage. The old man didn't pay attention to him as he indifferently looked at Dean. Do you know me? Dean smiled. Nice to meet you. My name is Dean. I'll be frank with you. The purpose of bailing you out is that I want you to work for me. I appreciate your management ability and the degree of blackness in your heart. The old man slightly raised his eyebrows. If you have investigated my resume then, you should know that none of my masters have a good end. Dudian smiled. Because they are just mortals. The old man sneered. Little guy, you seem to be very confident. Dean smiled and looked into his eyes. At least I have the confidence to suppress you. Is that so? The old man slowly stood up and dusted his body. Can you sleep well if you want to use me? Dean whispered. Don't doubt the people you use. I'll bail you out so I will trust you. I hope you won't let me down. That's a good sentence. The old man looked him up and down and said, "You don't look old, but you're quite bold. To be able to come here to bail me out, you must have a lot of power behind you. If you can leave this place, I naturally have no objections. If you want me to be loyal to you, that's fine, but whether you can trust me or not, I can't control that." Dean smiled. "Come out." The old man stared at him, suddenly smiled and said, "Before I come out, I have something to deal with." After he finished speaking, he tilted his head to look at the brown-haired young man beside him and said softly, "I said that when I come out, I won't let any of you go." The brown-haired youth's expression suddenly changed, and he angrily said, "How dare you? My hands have been stained with more blood than yours. Do you think I dare?" The old man sneered. The brown-haired youth's forehead overflowed with cold sweat. He took 2 steps back and said to Dean, This man is a madman. You should change the bail." Dean patted his shoulder and looked at the old man. "You are a smart person. You should know the smart approach." The old man glanced at him, and the killing intent in his eyes receded slightly. He nodded slightly and said, "All right. Open the door." Dudian told the brown-haired youth. The brown-haired youth's face turned pale. He looked at the old man and finally braced himself to step forward and open the cage. The old man smiled indifferently and pushed the door open. He looked at the brown-haired youth and whispered, "Take care." The brown-haired youth's face turned ugly. He gritted his teeth and said, "You madman, if you dare to break the law again, it won't be so easy next time." The old man smiled and didn't care. He came in front of Dean, and his eyes fell on Dean's left hand that was hanging on his neck. He said, "Is your arm injured? At such a young age, you have provoked an enemy. It's quite troublesome." Dean looked at him, but didn't say anything. He looked at the brown-haired youth and said, "Take me to the bottom floor." The brown-haired youth gritted his teeth, turned around and closed the cage. He led the way in front. The old man saw that Dean didn't pay attention to him, so he raised his eyebrows. He waited for Dean to turn around and then revealed a sneer. He glanced at Scar and Jean who were behind Dean. "Did you bail out 2 little guys from the first floor? If we have the resources to bail them out, we might as well bail out another one here. Although they're all brainless people, at least they can be of some help." Scar and Jin's face changed. Scar looked back at the old man and said, "Old man, what do you mean?" The old man stood still and looked at Scar's face. "Is the IQ of the little guys in the first floor so low that you need to translate?" Scar clenched his fists. "If you weren't bailed out by Dean, then you would be a dead man the moment you said the first sentence. Is that so?" The old man smiled. "That's what I wanted to say." Dean stopped and looked back at the two. He said to the old man, "Do you want to test my tolerance?" The old man's face slightly changed. He put away his smile and said, "It's just a suggestion. You bailed me out because you want me to give you some advice? I believe you can distinguish between what is advising and what is giving orders." Dean glanced at him indifferently, turned around and continued to move forward. The old man's face changed, and a trace of haze flashed in his eyes. After a moment, the crowd followed the brown-haired youth along the stairs to the bottom of the prison. They passed through several checkpoints along the way and finally reached the bottom of the prison. Dean clearly felt that the air in the bottom of the prison was much colder and the light was weak. There were only a few oil lamps shining on the corridors of the prison. The cells in the bottom of the prison were separated by concrete. Incidentally, the concrete mainly came from the wreckage of the buildings outside the giant wall. "This way, please." The one leading the way was replaced by the guard at the bottom level. He was trembling as he led the way in the middle of the aisle. From this small subconscious action, Dean could feel the fear in the guard's heart. Unlike the second layer of the prison, the bottom prison was extremely quiet. Only the footsteps of the crowd echoed. He looked at the prison that they passed by. Each prison had a heavy steel cast iron gate. There were several thick steel pillars that were used to deliver food on weekdays. Suddenly, Dean saw a face behind the steel pillar. It was an extremely hideous and distorted face. There were all kinds of scars on the face. Only one eye was left. It was staring at him like an evil ghost. Dean playfully stretched out his tongue to make a grimace. Bang! Suddenly, a loud noise came from behind the steel door, shaking the wall where the steel door was fastened and causing dust to fly out. The guard who was leading the way was shocked. He quickly pulled out his baton and came back. His face was pale as he looked at the cell. He was relieved to see that the iron door was safe and sound. He fiercely said, "Are you looking for a beating?" The evil face behind the prison turned to look at him but didn't speak. The guard felt uncomfortable as he was stared at by the evil face. He turned to Dean and said, "Mr. Dean, please come in." Dean nodded slightly. He winked at the people in the prison before leaving. He secretly sighed in his heart. Indeed, they were senior hunters at the bottom of the prison. Their bodies had been tortured by the prison, but they were still able to burst out such a strong power. He couldn't help but look forward to the two that he had bailed out. Soon, the guard stopped in front of a cell and said, "Number 3, get up. Someone has come to bail you out." The sound of dragging chains echoed in the cell. After a moment, a disheveled face appeared behind the steel pillar of the iron door. There was a pair of sharp shining eyes behind the disheveled hair. He glanced at the aisle outside. He saw Dean, Old Man, Scar and others coming from the side. He said, "Bail me out? Who is it?" The voice was low and hoarse. It was unpleasant to hear. Dean said, "Me, Dean. You will be loyal to me after you come out. Can you do it?" "You?" The man looked at Dean. His eyes flashed. "Well, I will." Dean smiled. "It's easy for me to take other people's words seriously. So I hope you can fulfill your promise." Chapter 269. Dean looked at him and said to the jailer, "Open the door." The jailer hesitated for a moment but still took out the key and opened the door. As the heavy iron door opened, everyone saw the appearance of the person. He was about 1.8 meters tall. His upper body was naked. His left and right chest muscles were covered with sword scars. There were steel nails pierced on both sides of his shoulder blades. But unlike the steel nails pierced by Dean and Old Man 7, this steel nail was like an eagle's claw. The front part of the nail was barbed in front of the chest. 2 thick chains were tied to the end of the nail and were fixed to the back wall. It was impossible to pull out the nail by oneself. "Unlock!" The brawny man grinned, revealing 2 rows of incomplete yellow teeth as he arrogantly ordered the jailer. The jailer's face was full of fear. He took out a key and carefully entered the cell. He went to the back of the burly man and unlocked the chains that were fastened to the steel nails on his back. With 2 bangs, 2 chains fell to the ground. The strong man licked his lips and slowly stepped out of the cell. He looked at Dean. "Little guy, let's go. I don't want to stay here any longer." "But you have to stay for a while." Dean said to the jailer, "Please lead the way to number 1. The man raised his eyebrows, but his face slightly changed as he heard Dudien's words. "Number 1? Do you want to bail out number 1? Do you have a problem with that?" Dean looked at him. The burly man was slightly stifled. He squinted his eyes and suddenly laughed, saying, "Of course not, please." Dean took back his eyes and motioned to the jailer to lead the way. The jailer locked the door of the prison and walked in front of the crowd. They turned a corner and came to a dead end. There were 2 cells. He came to the cell on the left and said, "Number 1, someone has come to bail you out. Get ready to come out." There was dead silence in the cell. There was no response. The jailer came to the side of the aisle and picked up an oil lamp. He passed it to the steel pillar of the iron door and looked inside. He was relieved to see that there was nothing unusual. He put the oil lamp back and took out the key to open the door. The cell was dark, but his vision wasn't affected. He saw that there was a cross on the wall. There were many chains and steel nails locking a slender figure. It seemed to be a woman. Her hair was extremely long and hung down to her knees. Her clothes were ragged and exposed a large part of her skin. There were even traces of dried blood on her knees. Dean was slightly startled. Although he expected number 1 to be extraordinary, he didn't expect to encounter such cruel treatment. Her whole body was pierced by steel nails. She couldn't even move or lie down. No wonder the jailer dared to open the door without seeing any response from inside. As the heavy iron door opened, the jailer took the lead to enter. Dean followed behind him. Brawny man, old man, Scar, Jean and others entered one after another. The old man took an oil lamp from the wall and illuminated the darkness of the cell. The figure nailed to the cross was revealed in front of everyone's line of sight. Everyone took a deep breath at the same time. Number 1, number 1. The jailer came to 3 meters in front of the cross and shouted. The figure nailed to the cross slowly raised her head. A pair of dark and cold eyes shot out from the gaps of her scattered hair. Dean felt an inexplicable sense of danger. Even the senior hunter didn't give him this feeling. He was surprised but also a bit happy. The situation was better than he expected. Someone has come to bail you out. The jailer took half a step back and whispered. The figure on the cross raised her head. Because of her hair, no one could see her expression and eyes. After a moment of silence, she slowly said, "Unlock." The jailer hesitated. "I'll unlock the lock for you. But don't be stupid. This person has come to bail you out. If you commit another crime, no one will dare to bail you out." The woman didn't respond. Her face seemed to be looking at Dean. It was obvious that Dean was the only one who wasn't from this prison. Dean also looked at her. He could clearly see her pair of black and white eyes staring at him, full of coldness and hostility. The oil lamp couldn't illuminate the dark hair gap, so he could clearly see that her black and white eyes were staring at him. Soon, the jailer came forward and untied the chains of the steel nails on her body one by one. The steel nails were distributed to her hands, feet, shoulder blades, abdomen and other joints. It was hard to imagine how much pain she had to endure when the steel nails were pierced. What was even more unbearable was that she had to maintain such a position for a long time. Even eating, sleeping and excreting were like this. Scar and Jean, who were standing behind, were shocked. They thought that the most insidious and despicable means of the jailer was to pierce their shoulder blades. They didn't expect that there would be torture that was 10 times worse than that. They knew that if they were pierced like this, they would have tried to free themselves. "Hello, my name is Dean." Dean looked at her. "I know that you haven't taken your revenge. I can help you." Whoosh! The chains were untied from the cross. The woman's arms loosened as she regained her mobility. However, there were still steel nails all over her body. Her eyes were cold as she asked, "Are you from the inner wall?" Her voice was surprisingly pleasant and clear. Dean calmly replied, "Not yet, but I will be in the future." The woman looked at him coldly. She lowered her head and didn't say anything. Dean looked at her but didn't say anything. He turned around and left the cell. After a moment, they came to the hall outside the prison. The guards in the hall returned to their original seats after Peter left. They continued to eat, drink, and play cards. But the topic of chatting shifted to Dean and the recently famous military crossbow. There were very few people who knew about military crossbows, but the jailers belonged to the military system, so they paid a lot of attention to military product. Almost everyone knew about the items that were published in the military newspaper. The guards in the hall immediately stood up as Dean and others came out. They were vigilant as they looked at Dean. Their faces changed when they saw number 7, old man, and number 1 who was walking at the end of the line. They were familiar with these people. They knew that the 3 of them had committed crimes. Now that they were out of prison, the outside world was bound to fall into darkness. Outside the prison gate, the warm sunlight shone on everyone's body. Scar and Jean took a deep breath. Their eyes were full of excitement. After so many years, They didn't expect to touch the sunlight again. This long-lost feeling was almost forgotten in their memory. The old man was silent along the way. He was extremely low-key. The strong man looked around as if he was thinking about something. Number 1 was walking at the end of the line. Her face was covered by her long hair. No one knew what she was thinking. They walked along the long aisle. The shadows in the lakes on both sides of the aisle smelled the smell of the crowd. Their reaction was more intense. Huge waves kept appearing on both sides of the aisle. They jumped high into the air. Their sharp teeth were exposed in front of everyone. They looked very strange. The strong man whistled as he saw the underwater monsters. His eyes flashed with bloodthirst. Soon, everyone arrived in front of the carriage parked by the lake. The 7th old man and the burly man looked at the flag on the carriage. The 7th old man's face showed a trace of surprise. Ryan family? Dean looked back at him and praised him without a smile. You have a good memory. The old man frowned. If I remember correctly, the Ryan family has long been in decline. They are a third-tier shareholder of the Mellon Consortium. Even if the Mellon Consortium is behind you, the Ryan family wouldn't send a carriage to you, right? Dudian indifferently said, The Mellon Consortium is our enemy. He stepped into the carriage. Because they were prepared beforehand, they specially called a large carriage. The carriage was big enough to accommodate 5 people. Scar and Jean took the lead to get on the carriage. Dudian said to them, You go to the front and accompany the coachman. Scar and Jean were startled. Scar suddenly thought of something and said in a worried tone, I'll stay. Dudian slightly shook his head. Go. The two saw his unquestionable expression, so they didn't stubbornly get off from the other side. They jumped to the front and squeezed on both sides of the coachman's seat. The old man saw the scene and laughed. He grabbed the door of the carriage and sat on the side of Dudian. The strong man sneered. He bent down and got into the carriage. He sat opposite to the old man. Chapter 270. Let's go, Dudian said to the coachman in front of him. The wheels of the carriage slowly moved. The 4 people sitting on the chairs in the carriage slightly swayed. They looked at each other but couldn't see the thoughts on their faces. The carriage soon entered the plain and went along the trail to the periphery of the Thorns jungle. There was a team of knights patrolling along the way. There were guards squatting in the grass of the Thorns jungle. Soon, the carriage left the brambles forest and traveled along the desolate path. Dudian slowly said, We are out of the prison range. If you want to kidnap me or take the opportunity to leave and completely restore your freedom, then you can act now. The quiet atmosphere in the carriage suddenly became tense. The old man's eyes flashed and he smiled. Little brother, you don't seem nervous to be with us 5 notorious criminals. Judging from your means and capital to bail us out, ordinary injuries should be healed very quickly. It's not difficult to buy the spring of life from the Holy Church in the black market. Is the injury on your left hand caused by a monster? Hearing his words, the brawny man next to him glanced at Dean. Dudian smiled. There is nothing to be nervous about. I used to be a member of the Thornflower prison, although I was innocent at that time. You too? The old man was a little surprised and said with interest, Looks like you have quite a powerful background. However, with such a powerful background, you were actually wrongly accused and imprisoned. Could it be that your enemy's background is even more powerful? Is it one of the 6 consortiums? Dudian smiled. You can remove the one of. The old man was startled. The strong man next to him was also startled. The face of the old man was covered by his hair. He was sitting motionless like a stone sculpture. The old man calmly looked at Dudian. Little brother, are you from the military? I haven't heard of any force that is the enemy of the 6 consortiums. Dudian lightly said, You haven't heard of it because I haven't founded it yet. You? Founded? The old man was slightly taken aback, but he immediately laughed. Little brother, it's not a good habit to like to brag at such a young age. You bailed us out just to help you do some shameful things, but if your enemy is the 6 major consortiums, I think it's better for you to send me back to prison. I'd rather retire quietly there. Dudian shrugged. If you are sure, I can send you back now. Old man number 7 chuckled and said, It's up to me whether I want to go back or not. When the dragon eagle spreads its wings, how can it return to its cage? Dean faintly squinted at him. In front of me, even a dragon eagle has to close its wings. Even a phoenix has to bow its head. Number 7's eyes narrowed. Is that so? I'd like to give it a try. Dudian said indifferently, Please. Old man number 7 narrowed his eyes as he looked at him. At this moment, number 1 who was sitting next to him suddenly said, I can help you once if you tell me how to return to the inner wall. Old man number 7's face slightly changed as he heard this. He was surprised because he noticed that the latter said return instead of enter. It meant that the latter himself came from the inner wall. Strong man's face slightly changed as his eyes turned gloomy. Dean quietly looked at her. The only way is to listen to me if you want to go back to the inner wall. Otherwise I'll lift your bail, and you'll be wanted in the city again. Not to mention entering the inner wall, it'll be difficult for you to enter the residential area. Number 1 stared at him. I'm afraid that you won't be able to go back. Dudian sighed but didn't say anything. Old man number 7's face relaxed as he heard number 1's words. He sneered at Dudian. Do you think that the 3 of us will let you go back? You better be obedient and confess who your backer is. Even if you don't tell us, we can find out from the coachman and the Ryan family. I'll count to 5. If you don't tell us, then you'll be responsible for the consequences. 5. Dudian looked at him. I think I should name you Old Crow in the future. I didn't expect such a deep person like you to talk so much. Old man number 7's eyes were gloomy. It seems that you don't want the chance. He looked at the strong man. I'm old. I may not be able to beat this kid. I can only rely on you. Strong man looked at him and grinned. Why should I help you? The 7th old man's expression changed slightly, and he snorted coldly. Since that's the case, let's accompany this kid back to his headquarters. At most, we'll just serve a little brat. I'm old anyway, and I don't want to go through so much trouble. Strong man sneered. Old thing, you better pay attention to your tone when talking to me. I don't know how to respect the old and love the young. Old man number 7's face was gloomy, but he didn't answer. Strong man looked at Dudian. Kid, I've tolerated you in the prison. You were still in your mother's belly when I was hunting outside the giant wall. I'll give you 2 seconds to think about it. Tell me who your backer is. After we enter the fortress, immediately write a letter to the person behind you to send me the bail letter. If you dare to arrest me, I'll be the first to kill you. Dudian faintly smiled. If that's the case, then your grandfather was just a drop of liquid when I was born. You're courting death. Strong man suddenly punched towards Dudian's cheek. The smile on Dean's face suddenly disappeared, and a cold light bloomed in his eyes. His right hand quickly stretched out, and the moment the brawny man made his move, he fiercely punched his armpit. Unexpectedly, he was the first to hit. Bang! The strong man groaned as he felt pain in his armpit. His fist suddenly lost its strength. Dean didn't stop. He grabbed the linen prison uniform and pulled the man's upper body towards him. Although he was able to stabilize his body in time, he quickly changed his grip into a fist and hit the man's face. The brawny man couldn't dodge and screamed in pain. His fingers grabbed the wooden bar on the edge of the carriage. He quickly pulled away and looked at Dean in shock. Old man number 7 was also shocked. He didn't expect such a reversal of the situation. The young boy had such skill and strength. Dudian was sitting on his chair. Although the strong man was a senior hunter, he was imprisoned in Thorn Flower Prison. His physical strength was exhausted. Moreover, he didn't know the details of the strong man. So he was caught off guard. If it was a head-on battle, the two would be evenly divided. If the strong man's injury was healed, then he wouldn't be the opponent of the strong man. But at that time, he would have other means to suppress the strong man. This is the first offense. Dudian indifferently looked at Old Man number 7 and Strong Man. You have 2 more chances to try. But after the 3rd chance, I believe you will cry in front of me. Old Man number 7's face turned ugly when he heard Dudian's confident words. He deeply looked at Dudian and bowed his head to look at his knees. Are you the one who escaped from the prison? Number 1 suddenly asked. Dudian looked at her. Do you know? Number 1 glanced at him but didn't say anything and turned his head away. Old Man number 7 and Strong Man were stunned. They looked at Dudian incredulously. They had heard about the escapee from the jailer's chat. They didn't expect that the only person who had escaped from Thornflower prison in 50 years was sitting in front of them. Chapter 271. Dudian glanced at the old man and the strong man. Donald Nicotin, 58 years old this year. He has been in prison for 9 years. His father was a butler of an aristocratic family. He died of kidney cancer. At the age of 17, he replaced his father to manage the aristocratic family. At the age of 23, he secretly transferred the family's property. After he resigned, he sued the magistrate for detention and execution. At the age of 25, he entered the home of a wealthy businessman. In only 3 years, all the properties of the rich businessman were renamed under your name. Since then, you have changed from a servant class to a well-known wealthy businessman in the commercial district. However, your reputation is too bad. The aristocracy has always cared about reputation. They were hostile to you. In order to gild their identity, they tried to buy an aristocratic residence and join the aristocracy. However, they were sold by their son and daughter-in-law's family. They were imprisoned in Thornflower prison for life. The old man's face slightly changed as he heard Dudian's resume. You have investigated very carefully. Dudian glanced at him and turned to the strong man next to him. Sergei, 32 years old this year. He has been in prison for 7 years. He was a senior hunter under the Krulov Consortium. He graduated from the regular hunter college. He has a brilliant record and has created huge profits for the Krulov Consortium. During his 9 years of hunting career, he has hunted and killed 17 named monsters. He has one of the 10 rare named monsters, Steel Dragon magic marks. He was a knight and had a bright future. But because he was greedy for the beauty of the Krulov Consortium's first beauty Granita, he repeatedly offended the Krulov Consortium. He was sentenced to Thornflower prison for 30 years for attempted rape. The strong man's eyes were gloomy as he stared at Dudian. Dudian indifferently said, I spent more than 100,000 gold coins to bail both of you out. Now that you are bailed out, I will have a bad relationship with the Krulov Consortium. I need you to make up for the price. The old man Donald Nicotin sneered. You know my resume. I can't do anything but falsify accounts. Even before I went to prison, I couldn't earn 100,000 gold coins. Now that I'm old, I don't have the ability to do so. Dudian indifferently said, You don't have to worry about this. Just listen to my orders and complete the tasks I give you. Sergei looked at number 1. What about her? She came from the inner wall. What is she doing? Dean indifferently smiled. She did what you did in prison. She's a punisher? Sergei's pupils shrank. Donald Nikustin was also slightly stunned. To him, the thing he feared the most was the Inquisition and the disciplinary officers that everyone there feared the most. He did not expect to see one sitting next to him, and it was even his cellmate. Number 1's hair swayed, his expression unreadable. Dudian slowly said, Gwyneth, 17 years old. 17? 17? Dudian didn't finish his words as Nicholas and Sergei were shocked. They were stunned as they looked at the skinny girl. They never thought that the face covered by the long hair would be a 17-year-old girl. Dudian paused for a moment. Inner Wall Magistrates Blazing Sun Medal. Specialized in hunting senior hunter-level criminals. Parents' information is unknown. Birthplace is unknown. Family is unknown. Imprisoned for 3 years on the charge of killing an aristocrat. Blazing Sun level? Sergei's pupils shrank. As a senior hunter, he had always been very concerned about the disciplinary members of the magistrate. Every one of them was a terrifying existence. Even an experienced senior hunter like him wouldn't be able to escape. It was said that the Silver Moon Medal was above the Blazing Sun Medal. It was said that a disciplinary member with the Silver Moon Medal could hunt down a senior hunter. But there was a big chance that the senior hunter would escape. But the disciplinary members with the Blazing Sun Medal rarely failed. It was said that they had evolved to the peak of the hunter's level. However, even such a character was imprisoned in prison. Moreover, her age was too young. Did she start to learn to fight when she was learning to walk? Dudian looked at Gwyneth and calmly said, "I've investigated the aristocratic family you killed. They are called Laporte family. They are still in the inner wall. Even their industry has extended to the commercial district of the outer wall. I can help you if you want to exterminate them. But you have to assist me and listen to my words first. In addition, you have no other choice. Even if you kill me, you will be caught. The magistrate won't allow an existence like you to lurk outside. The aristocracy won't allow it either." Gwyneth was silent like a stone sculpture. Old man Nicholas and Sergei looked at each other in silence. The carriage rumbled along the path until it reached the border fortress. The coachman showed the clearance letter to the guard and smoothly entered the fortress. Dudian glanced at the three. "It seems that the three of you have temporarily accepted your fate. In that case, I wish everyone a happy cooperation in the future." The three bowed their heads in silence. The old man Nicotine sighed. "I never thought that the little fellows in their teens would all be so powerful. It seems like I am really old." Dudian smiled. "You don't think so?" Nicholas smiled and shook his head. He didn't say anything. Dean took them directly to the castle on the Mosa River. He waited for everyone to get off the car. He looked at Nicholas. "From now on you are my butler. But don't play any tricks. Even if you want to play, don't let me find out." Then he went into the castle. Everyone followed him into the castle, sizing it up along the way. Dean said as he walked, "Before you think about getting away from me, you have to solve a problem by yourself." "What problem?" Sergei frowned. Nicotine's eyes flickered as he said, "Are you saying that we have to wash away our own identities?" Dudian nodded, "Yes. All the major consortiums are staring at me. The news of you being bailed out is bound to leak out. The consortiums that want to attack me will inevitably use you as a pretext. So you have to be ready for the first wave of problems." Sergei sneered. "I'd like to see who dares to make trouble." Dudian glanced at him. "Even a punisher like Number 1 has been caught for killing an aristocrat. Don't think about it with your assassination skills." Sergei frowned and looked at Gwyneth. "Hey, did you assassinate the nobles or did you kill them?" Gwyneth's hair was slightly blown by the wind, as if she didn't hear anything. Sergei's face slightly changed as he coldly snorted. Nicholas stared at Dudian. "We have been imprisoned for too long. We are seriously out of touch with the outside world. It's impossible for us to compete with the 6 consortiums. What do you want us to do?" Dudian indifferently smiled. "It depends on your performance. Today you have just been released from prison. Go wash and rest. If there is anything else, we can talk about it in the evening." He looked at Scar and Jean. "Both of you should take a rest. I'll help you pull out the nails." Sergei frowned. "What about me?" Dudian calmly said. "You and Number 1 should keep the nails for the time being. It's best not to pull them out without authorization. I don't mind nailing them." Sergei's heart sank. He knew that Dudian was afraid of his strength, so he used the nails to contain it. He cursed in his heart, despicable boy. But there was nothing he could do about it. At night, the chef hired by Dudian had finished cooking the dishes. Two of the youngest maids from the Ryan family brought the dishes to the table. They stood respectfully on both sides of the table. Dean was the first to take a seat. He could smell that Nicholas, Sergei, Number 1 and others were all over the castle and were rushing over to them. Jean and Scar were the first to sit. Jean was a Knight of Light from the Holy Church. Because of his family's mistakes, he was exempted from his duties and imprisoned to atone for his crimes. Scar was a senior primary hunter. The reason why he was imprisoned was that he had returned home after hunting. He saw a rich aristocrat from a consortium raping his wife and daughter. In a fit of rage, he killed him and was sentenced to prison. Fortunately, the rich aristocrat's family was only a second-rate aristocrat. He had many brothers and sisters, so his death didn't cause too much of a sensation. Otherwise Scar would have been sentenced on the spot. Both of them came to the table. They glanced at the seats and consciously sat in the third row. Dudian glanced at them but didn't say anything. Chapter 272. Both of them looked at the table. Nicholas calmly pulled out the second row of seats and sat down. Sergei pulled out the first row of seats and sat down. He looked at the table full of delicious food. He took a deep breath and excitedly reached out to grab a roasted pheasant leg in front of him. Whoosh! A silver light shot out and nailed itself to the table half an inch in front of his finger. It was a silver table knife. Sergei's face slightly changed as he turned to look at Dean. "What do you mean?" Dudian indifferently said. "There are family rules. If you eat on my table, then you must abide by my rules. By the way, this is the second time I forgive you." Finished, he looked at the maid next to him. "Give me another knife." "Yes." The maid was silent out of fear. Sergei's face changed as he retracted his hand. "You have a lot of rules. It's better to write them down. I'm a rough person, so I don't want to break your rules." Dean indifferently said, "My rules are very simple. There is only one rule. Be a good person. You only need to abide by this rule." Sergei slightly frowned as he coldly snorted and turned away. At this time, the sound of footsteps echoed as a girl slowly came down from the stairs. Dean looked up, and a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. He saw that the girl was as beautiful as an elf. Her complexion was abnormally pale, and she looked somewhat weak. But her pair of silver moon-like eyebrows had a bit of heroic spirit. Her eyes were black, like two deep pools with death and coldness. Her whole body was wrapped in a loose red robe. Her hair was extremely long, tied behind her head and hanging down to her waist. When she walked, her steps were not big, like a spirit in the dark. Sergei, Nicholas, Scar, Jean, and the others looked up. There was a trace of amazement on their faces. They had been imprisoned in prison for several years. Not to mention such a beautiful girl, they didn't even see a fat woman. Sergei's eyes flashed with a trace of passion. His fingers that were holding the knife slightly tightened. He didn't know that this small movement was seen by Nicholas, who was sitting opposite him. The girl was Gwyneth. She silently came down the stairs and sat in the first row. She looked at Dean. "I'm hungry." Dean nodded. "Everyone is here. Let's start." Nicholas laughed. "Do we need to pray before eating?" Sergei's eyebrows rose as he looked at Dean. He was about to stab the roasted pheasant leg. Dudian indifferently said, "No, we don't believe in God." Then he picked up the knife handed by the maid and picked up the grilled steak in front of him. "Tomorrow Sergei will get up early and go out with me. Nicholas, I'll leave the castle to you. If anyone comes looking for me, refuse them all and say that I'm busy. Remember, don't reveal my whereabouts." Nicotine's eyes flashed as he nodded. "I understand." Sergei bit the drumstick and said, "Where are we going to work?" "You'll know when the time comes." Gwyneth cut the foie gras on her plate and asked, "What about me?" Dean looked at her. "Your task is very simple. There are 10 potted plants in the yard. Help me take good care of them. Don't let them die." Gwyneth frowned as she stared at him. She lowered her head and continued to cut the foie gras. Scar and Jean looked at Dean. "What are we going to do? You have just pulled out the nails. Rest well." Dean didn't raise his head as he replied. After dinner, everyone returned to their respective rooms. The next morning, Dudian got up on time. He asked the maid to wake up Sergei, who was still sleeping soundly. He left the castle in a carriage under the escort of Nicholas. There was a trace of coldness in Nicholas's eyes as he looked at the carriage gradually going away. He turned back to the castle and carefully looked at the 2 young maids who were cleaning the dust in the hall. He confirmed that they didn't have extraordinary power. He went up the stairs to the 2nd floor and deliberately walked to his room with heavy footstep. When he came to the corridor of his room, he bent down and took off his shoes. He stepped on the carpet with his socks on. His figure flashed through the corridor and came to another corridor. This was Dean's room. He came to the front of the room, took out a handkerchief from his pocket and put it on the doorknob. He gently twisted the door and found that the door was not closed. With a slight pull, the door was opened. Surprised, he looked inside through the crack of the door and saw a beautiful figure standing in front of the desk in the room. She tilted her head and looked at the crack of the door. The figure was Gwyneth. Nicholas's heart tightened, but he was relieved. He opened the door and quietly came in. He locked the door and smiled. "It seems that we have the same purpose." Gwyneth's eyes didn't contain the slightest emotion. She indifferently looked at him but didn't speak. Being stared at by her, Nicotine felt a little unnatural. Coughing lightly, he said, "You're here to look for the bale, right? Have you found it?" Gwyneth quietly looked at him. "I just came in." Nicholas was relieved. "Let's look for it together. But don't leave any traces or fingerprints. The power behind this kid isn't small and he is on guard against us. If he comes back to check his fingerprints, then he will know that we have come in." Gwyneth was silent. Nicotine was used to her silence. Seeing that she was silent, he walked around the room and looked around. He pulled open the wardrobe and other places. A moment later, he knocked on the bottom of one of the wardrobes. He immediately knew that there was a hidden compartment inside. He immediately pulled out the clothes that were in the way and looked through the gap. He opened the splint inside and revealed a hidden drawer. He was happy, found it. Gwyneth came over and silently looked at him. Nicholas saw the keyhole on the secret drawer. He immediately put his hand into his pocket and took out a small iron needle. He inserted it into the keyhole. After a moment, he heard a clicking sound and the secret drawer loosened. His face showed a bit of complacent smile. He pulled out the secret drawer and saw a stack of white papers. But it wasn't the documents he had imagined. Instead, it was some sketches with strange shape. He carefully opened it with a handkerchief and found that it was all sketches. He slightly frowned. "There is an envelope next to it," Gwyneth said. Hearing her words, Nicotine's eyes fell on the envelope next to him. He had already noticed this, but judging from its size and thickness, it was obviously not a bail letter. However, now that he had already looked through the other things, it didn't matter if there was only this one left. He immediately picked up the envelope and found that there was no paste on it. Feeling strange, he carefully opened the envelope and poured out a piece of paper from the thin envelope. "Don't go through my things. Return them to where they were. A note." Nicotine was stunned on the spot, dumbfounded. Chapter 273. After leaving the Mosa River, Dean ordered the carriage to go to the nearest raw material market. "What are we going to do there?" Sergei, who was sitting in the same carriage, looked at Dean in surprise. Dean glanced at him. "What do you think we can do in the raw materials market?" "By raw materials?" Sergei held back his displeasure. Aren't you going to take me to hunt outside the giant wall? Dean rolled his eyes. How many can you kill without a weapon? Sergei snorted and proudly said, Even if I'm unarmed, I can kill hundreds of monsters below level 20 in a day. But if I wait for my body to recover, that's too little. Dean shook his head. Sergei was stunned. Too little? Pitifully little. After a moment, both of them came to the raw materials market in the Eastern District. The area of the market was very large. It was about the size of a small town. It contained raw materials of various materials. The roads were extremely spacious so that they could shuttle through the market. It was still early, but there were a lot of people gathered in the market. They were waiting in front of various chambers of commerce. If one took a closer look, one would know that these chambers of commerce had discount activities today. Dean ordered the coachman to go directly to the steel market. Among all kinds of minerals, coal and other natural raw materials, steel was one of the new materials produced by the Temple of Elements. The history of steel was decades earlier than plastic. It was called an artificial raw material like plastic. Although the history of steel wasn't as good as coal and raw minerals, but the demand wasn't inferior to the former. There were many chambers of commerce selling steel in the raw materials market. Tens of thousands of tons of steel were traded every day. Dean knew that behind such a huge turnover was the rapid transformation of the living environment within the giant wall. However, due to the limitations of the current smelting technology, the quality of the steel in the market was far from what he needed. It could only be used to make ordinary firearms and hot weapons such as cannons. The quality of the steel was far from enough to make tanks, armored vehicles, and so on. Therefore, Dean was ready to refine and temper the steel to improve the purity. But to get satisfactory steel, he needed to pass through the electroslag remelting environment, which required the use of electricity. As the saying goes, pull one hair and move the whole body. Dudian had planned to make a generator, but not a modern generator, but an early hand-cranked DC generator. Dudian got off the carriage and took Sergei to a steel chamber of commerce. If he remembered correctly, the backing of this steel chamber of commerce was the Huasheng Consortium. At present, the only consortium that wouldn't fall out with the Ryan family was the Huasheng Consortium. Although they had sold the military crossbow to the Ryan family last time, but this was a negotiation. They wouldn't become enemies because of it. Moreover, it was a matter of mutual consent. Unfortunately, our consortium doesn't have a chamber of commerce. Dean looked at the majestic gate of the Chamber of Commerce and sighed in his heart. He walked into the Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, the maid at the door said respectfully. Dean came into the hall. The magnificent hall made people feel small, but he was used to such luxurious clothes. He glanced around and a beautiful middle-aged woman quickly came over. She glanced at the tall and sturdy Sergei and smiled. Master, what do you need? Dudian calmly asked, What is the best steel model? The best steel is the X30 type. The middle-aged woman smiled. Dudian nodded. Okay, I want to order 10 tons. 10 tons? The middle-aged woman's eyes lit up. No problem. Do you know the price? Yes. Dudian nodded. The middle-aged woman was relieved. Please wait a moment. She hurried away. Sergei looked at Dudian and asked, Why did you come to buy steel? Do you know a powerful craftsman? Even if you want to save money, you shouldn't be so frugal. Dudian whispered, Shut up. Sergei's eyebrows slightly raised as he looked down at the boy. He clenched his fingers but didn't speak again. Hey, this person is... Suddenly a surprised voice echoed from the side. Dudian looked over and saw a 17 or 18-year-old girl looking at him. She was dressed in simple clothes, but Dudian saw a medal on her chest. It was a hexagonal shield. It was the medal of the Temple of Elements. The pattern of the medal was a golden hand which represented the metal element faction. It's really me. The girl's eyes widened as she saw Dudian's face. Are you Architect Dean? Dean didn't expect to meet an architect from the Temple of Elements here. It seems that his reputation in this circle is really resounding. He nodded. Hello, it's me. The girl was surprised. My name is Ailon. It's an honor to see you in person. Dudian smiled. You are too polite. The girl suddenly thought of something. I remember that you are an architect from the Wood Element faction. What are you doing here? Are you here to buy steel? Are you going to add steel to your new invention? His eyes were full of excitement and worship. Although Dean's military crossbow belonged to Wood Element, but the crossbow bolt was made of metal. So it was a combination of Wood Element and Metal Element. However, Wood Element was the dominant element. For an oracle, it was already very impressive to be able to mobilize the elements they belonged to and create a new divine art. It was even more difficult to add other elements into it, and it also proved a kind of talent and attainments from the side. Dudian smiled. Maybe my new invention will be a metal element one. The girl covered her mouth. You really know how to joke. If that's the case, then you are an architect of two elements, and both of them are very powerful. Dudian smiled but didn't say anything. Ailon, who are you talking to? A voice echoed from behind. Ailon looked back and saw a young man dressed in an expensive suit. He was tall and had blonde hair. He was full of noble temperament and had a medal on his chest. He was also an architect of metal element. The young man came forward and pulled Ailon. He looked at Dudian with hostility. If he didn't notice the 2 meters tall bodyguard standing behind Dudian, he would have given him a cold face. Ailon saw that the young man didn't recognize Dudian, so she excitedly introduced him. He is the genius architect Dean. He is the youngest person to win the epic medal. We are so lucky to meet him here. The young man was startled as he looked at Dudian. The hostility on his face didn't fade but became thicker. He pulled Ailon's hand. Ailon, come with me. I have something to tell you. He grabbed her hand and turned away. Ailon was at a loss but didn't resist. Dean quietly watched. He saw that the two of them had walked to a corner far away from his line of sight. The youth lowered his voice and said, Don't get close to this person. He is too dangerous. Dangerous? You don't understand. Although this person is talented, but he is arrogant. He has offended a big consortium. Our family will be in trouble if people know that I have been in contact with him. Is it that serious? Well, don't get close to him in the future. I hope that no one saw what happened just now. Dudian's eyes lit up as he heard their voices. Chapter 274. After a while, the middle-aged woman came back. Dudian paid the deposit and scheduled the time to receive the goods. He left the Chamber of Commerce and went to other parts of the raw materials market to check the degree of purification. At noon, Dudian and Sergei arrived at the Ryan family. Old Fulin's eyes were attracted by Sergei, who was standing behind Dudian. There was a trace of fear in his eyes as he looked at Dudian. You're right on time. We're about to eat. Dudian smiled. I'm here for the meal. Who is this? Old Fulin looked at Sergei. Dudian smiled. He is the one who was bailed out in your name. His name is Sergei. He is a senior hunter from the Krulov Consortium. Senior hunter? Jake, Sandro and the others who were sitting on both sides of the table were surprised when they heard Dean's words. Their faces were full of awe and fear, but they were more excited and excited. Even though they were the children of the third generation, they knew the value of a senior hunter. At the end of the table, the girl named Lena showed the same expression as the others, curiously looking at Sergei. Dudian looked at Sergei. This is the patriarch of the Ryan family, Old Fulin. Hurry up and thank him. Sergei quickly glanced at the surroundings as he entered the restaurant. There was something strange in his heart. Whether it was the external structure or the internal decoration of the castle, they were extremely rough and simple. It could even be called simple and crude. He noticed the guards along the way. There were knights with knights' medals. Their eyes were sloppy and their posture was lazy. It was as if they didn't have any bones. At first glance, he knew that they were ordinary people. But everything he had seen showed that the background of the castle was poor. How could such an aristocrat have the funds to bail him out? He suddenly remembered the time when he returned from the Thornflower prison. Dean's confident and mysterious eyes were on the carriage. He glanced at the teenager in front of his chest. There was a faint smile on his face as he looked at old Foulin. "Hello, Patriarch. I'm Sergei." Old Foulin was afraid, but he was calm on the surface. He slightly nodded. "Aunt Lon, give Mr. Sergei a seat." Auntie Lon, a middle-aged woman, immediately asked a maid to bring a heavy chair over. If it was in the past, Sergei would have already sat down. He didn't even put a noble in his eyes. When he was in the Krulov consortium, a small noble like this would bow and scrape in front of him. He already knew how these nobles changed their faces in front of others. But at this moment, seeing that Dudyan didn't sit down, he also refrained from sitting down. He was secretly unhappy in his heart. He wanted to get rid of the little devil's control and completely restore his freedom. Dudyan invited old Foulin to take a seat before following him. They casually chatted about some interesting things. Dudyan asked Sergei to wait downstairs after the meal while he followed old Foulin. Sandro helped him to go upstairs. Dean winked at Sandro after entering the room. Sandro nodded and immediately dismissed the nearby maids. "Is there still no movement from Melon Consortium?" Dudyan whispered to old Foulin after he smelled that there were no other smells lurking around. Old Foulin shook his head. "Not yet. I've seen their resumes. You can't control them even if you bail them out. These murderers aren't small characters. The specific process and purpose of their crimes have long been verified. Although Sergei has a big body, but his eyes are focused. I think he is a person with a deep mind. You should be careful." Dudyan always believed in old Foulin's eyes. He nodded. "I will. It's the Melon Consortium that hasn't made any movement for so long. Perhaps they have already made their move, but we haven't discovered it yet. We must find out the direction of their actions as soon as possible." Melon Consortium was like a thorn in his heart. The sooner it was pulled out the easier it would be. Old Foulin sighed. "We have a small number of people and a weak foundation. The strength of the investigation is too weak." How could Dean not know this? He felt the same regret in his heart. This was the lack of manpower. He pondered a little. "I'll send Barton and the other two to investigate this matter." "Them?" Old Foulin looked at him. "Can they be trusted?" "Yes," Dudyan said. "They have been trained by you for a long time. They must have adapted to the life in the commercial district. They know how to do things. It's good that they can be trusted." Old Foulin was relieved as he heard Dudyan's answer. So far, Dudyan hadn't let him down. So he was more convinced by Dudyan's choice. "Today you brought this person. The other 4 are in your residence. You have to be careful." Although old Foulin expected that Dudyan would be on guard, he still reminded him. Dudyan nodded and continued to discuss other things with old Foulin. Then he left the room. When he went downstairs, he immediately saw Sergei sitting on a chair in the hall. Hutun, Jake, and a few other third-generation juniors surrounded him. Their faces were full of politeness, with a hint of flattery, and they kept taking the initiative to find topics to get closer to him. "Mr. Dean? Mr. Dean was bailed out by my grandfather," Hugh replied with a smile. Dudyan's eyes lit up when he heard Hugh's words. His footsteps on the stairs were a bit heavier. It caught Sergei's attention. He looked up at Dudyan. There was a faint smile on his face. Hugh and others didn't speak as they saw Dudyan come over. Dudyan went straight to the door. "It's time to go back." Sergei smiled and stood up. He looked at Jake and others. "I'll go back first. See you later." He followed Dean's figure to the carriage outside the castle. Zendral, Jake and others went out to see them off. The carriage slowly left the ancient castle. Sergei leaned against the car and smiled at Dudian. Do you want to disguise it as a cooperative relationship? Old Fulin was kidnapped by you after you broke out of the prison. Unfortunately, his children think that you are loyal to their father. They don't know that you can kill him at any time. You didn't do that. Is there anything else that you want the old man to help you? Dudian was silent and indifferent. Sergei was more proud as he saw Dudian acquiesce. I didn't expect you to be an architect of the Temple of Elements at such a young age. Hunters are civilians. You don't have a backer. You are the mastermind behind the scenes. You bailed us out. Do you want to use us to help you take revenge? Sergei was more proud as he laughed. I didn't expect you to be an architect of the Temple of Elements. Dudian indifferently said, When it comes to skills, I'll have to ask you for advice. I'll leave the training ground behind the castle to you. I'll rebuild it like the Hunter College. Starting from tomorrow, I'll train the hunters systematically. You'll be my instructor for the time being. Sergei snorted as he saw Dudian change the topic. My training is very strict. I'm afraid that you'll cry. The sky was getting dark at dusk. Nicholas, Gwyneth, Scar, Jean and others were having dinner in the castle. Jean looked at the empty seat and asked Nicholas, Won't the young master come back tonight? Now that he had decided to follow Dudian, he changed the way he addressed Dudian. He didn't dare to call him Dean at will. Nicholas glanced at him and said, You're asking me, who should I ask? I heard that you and he were cellmates on the same floor. Can you tell me how he escaped? Scar snorted. Dean? Master bailed you out. You'd better know your place. Moreover, you're not young. You won't be able to live for more than a few years. You should be content to live a stable life in your later years. What else do you want? Nicholas's face turned cold. You know that I'm old. You should have the attitude of an old man. Scar sneered. Do you think that we are good people who respect the elderly? Nicotine looked at him for a moment, then suddenly smiled and said, You're right. Then he turned his head and continued to eat his food. At this time, the sound of hooves echoed from outside. The maid at the door shouted in surprise, The young master is back. Scar and Jean put down their tableware and went out to greet the young master. Nicholas's eyes flashed. He also got up and went out. Only Gwyneth didn't move. She continued to eat the food in her bowl. Dudian opened the door and patted Sergei's arm. You've worked hard today. You should rest early tonight. Tomorrow we'll expand the training ground. If you don't have enough manpower, then rent a few slaves. Sergei sneered in his heart. Isn't it too late? But he still had a smile on his face. There's no need to be so troublesome for such a small matter. But I won't show any mercy to you. Dudian laughed as he didn't mind. It seemed that he was in a very good mood. He turned around and saw Scar and Jean coming out of the hall. He took back his hand from Sergei's arm. Have you eaten? Jean was embarrassed. I just ate. I thought that you wouldn't come back. Dudian smiled. It's okay. Let's go and eat together. He took the lead to enter the house. He looked at Nicholas, who was smiling at him. Dudian nodded and entered the dining room. Gwyneth saw Dudian enter the hall. She looked up and whispered, Master. Chapter 275. Go and prepare the tableware. Ask the chef to add a snowy steak. Nicholas ordered the maid as he returned to the dining room. Yes. The maid quickly ran to the kitchen. Dudian stopped the maid. Cook a few more portions. You will have a good appetite in the evening. Yes. The maid hurriedly answered, turned around, and left quickly. I didn't expect you to come back tonight. Nicholas pulled out a chair and sat down. If I knew it would be like this, I would have asked the chef to prepare it. Dudian smiled. How is it? Are you used to living here? Nicholas saw Dudien's smile and suddenly remembered the note he had found in the morning. His heart secretly jumped, but on the surface he looked as usual. At least it is much more comfortable than the prison. The scenery of the river outside is also good. Dudien smiled. After a moment, the maid served the dinner and he began to eat. He chatted with several people while eating. After the dinner was over, he got up and went back to his room. After closing the door, Dean glanced at his wardrobe and went to the desk next to him. He took out a match and lit the oil lamp. He took out a small black carving knife and a piece of wood from the drawer. He grabbed the knife with his unconscious left hand and gently scratched the wood carving. The marks were sometimes deep and sometimes shallow. His control of strength was still extremely rusty. Dudien quietly practiced the control of his left hand. At the same time he thought about other things. The night passed by quickly. The next day, Dudien woke up on time and found that Nicholas got up earlier than him. He also woke up the maids. Nicholas looked up and smiled as he saw Dudien coming down the stairs. "Master, good morning. The hot water has been prepared for you." He looked like a real butler. His attitude was respectful and there was nothing wrong with him. Dudien used the hot water and a towel from the maid to wash his face and rinse his mouth. He came to the dining room and sat down. "Good spirit today," Nicholas respectfully said. "Master is overpraising me." Dudien looked at his shoulder. "How is the wound healing?" Nicholas smiled. "I'm old. The speed of healing isn't as fast as you young people. Sometimes, when a wound heals too quickly, it heals and forgets the pain." Dudien smiled. "If the resume isn't wrong, then you have relied on your wealth to buy God's blessing. Your physique has been upgraded to intermediate hunter level." Nicotine's eyes flashed. "Master, I'm just a primary hunter. There is still a long way to go before I become an intermediate hunter." Dudien smiled. "A primary hunter couldn't break free from the encirclement of 2 teams of Knights of the Magistrate and killed 4 official Knights of the Magistrate." Nicotine smiled and said, "Misinformation. It's just a rumor. It's just a rumor. I don't have the ability to kill a knight." "Maybe." Dean faintly smiled. At this moment, the sound of hooves could be heard from outside. Nicotine said, "It should be the postman delivering the newspaper. I'll go take a look." He turned and left the hall. After a moment, he came back with 2 newspapers in his hand. He handed them to Dean. "Master, your newspaper." Dudien nodded and took the newspapers. As he flipped through the newspaper, Nicotine slowly retreated. Soon, a maid brought in breakfast, milk, fried eggs, and meat rolls. Dean ate and read the newspaper. His military crossbow occupied a large page in the financial newspaper. Recently, the war at the border was tight. There were many news reports about the border, especially about the dynamics of various military goods and the transfer of military personnel. All the news agencies were paying attention to them from time to time. Does the Mellon Consortium want to wait for the limelight to pass? Dudien looked at the newspaper of the Mellon Consortium. It mentioned that the direction of the Mellon Consortium revolved around the mining industry and the medical industry. These were the 2 strongest weapons in the hands of the Mellon Consortium. The competitor of the mining industry was the Scott Consortium. The Scott Consortium was the largest operator of the mining industry. They still occupied the majority of the channels and market share. But in the medical industry, the Mellon Consortium was in an invincible state. The medical industry of the Mellon Consortium occupied more than 70% of the market in the 3 districts of the outer wall. 6 of the top 10 hospitals belonged to the Mellon Consortium. One of the remaining 4 was a partnership between the Mellon Consortium and the Green Consortium. But it was only a matter of time before the Mellon Consortium would be completely annexed. The medical industry is the biggest weapon of the Mellon Consortium. It's the main reason for its rapid rise. Dudien's eyes lit up. If we can give a heavy blow to the medical industry, then the Mellon Consortium will be hit hard. He quietly read the newspaper as he pondered. As time passed, Sergei, Scar, Jean and others got up and went downstairs to eat breakfast. Master, I won't call you master when we are on the training ground, Sergei said as he chewed the meat. Dudian put down the newspaper and indifferently said, Don't eat greasy food in the morning. I like it. Sergei snorted. After breakfast, Dudian and Sergei went to the back of the castle. There was a circle of stones in the training ground. It was a place for knights and guards to train. It was about 7,000 or 8,000 square meters. There were different training tools. Your physical strength is barely comparable to a senior hunter. The magic marks haven't transformed yet. Let's skip the simple introductory courses. Let's go straight to the hard part. Sergei grinned. I heard that you are a hunter. Hunters test eyesight, arm strength, and endurance. Let's exercise your arm strength this morning. Be careful not to break your arm. Dudian indifferently smiled. His left hand should have recovered by now as the stitches should have healed. Sergei smiled as he saw that Dudian didn't reply. Do you know about frogs? The first lesson is to stand upside down in frog posture. Bend your elbows at 90 degrees and keep your legs close to each other. It will also exercise your balance. Dudian smiled. You should know that I have a way to go to the hunter school to know their training courses. If you teach something different, then you know the consequences. Sergei's smile stiffened. Then go and inquire about it. In his heart, he was secretly rejoicing. Fortunately, he was cautious, and the first frog stand he chose was in the hunter school. Dudian looked at him and did as he was told. Sergei sneered. The best training time for an ordinary person who hasn't improved their physique is 1 hour and 20 minutes. Although it's your first exercise, you should at least do it for 3 or 4 hours. Dudian bent his elbows and said, You can go and expand the training ground first. Sergei shrugged. Don't be lazy. I'll keep an eye on you. Then he turned and left. A carriage arrived outside the castle while Dudian was training. There was a flag of the Green Consortium on it. An elegant middle-aged man got off the carriage. He was friendly to the maid at the door. The maid immediately went into the room to inform Nicholas. Nicholas was looking at the training ground from the window upstairs. He was startled when he heard the maid's report. He immediately went downstairs to greet the middle-aged man. Hello. Nicholas smiled politely. I am Mr. Dean's butler, and you are? The middle-aged man smiled. I'm representing the Green Consortium. I'm here to visit Architect Dean. Is he inside? Architect? Nicholas was startled. It's not convenient for him at the moment. If there's nothing important, I can pass the message. The middle-aged man smiled. It's an important matter. It's better to talk to him face to face. I can wait for him. Seeing him say this, Nicholas could only say, All right, please. He led the middle-aged man into the living room and ordered the maid to serve him tea. I didn't expect Architect Dean to be so thrifty. After entering the hall, the refined middle-aged man glanced around and said with a smile, If you don't have enough money, please tell our Green Consortium. Nicholas smiled. Young master has always been thrifty. How would I dare to trouble the Green Consortium for a little money? The middle-aged man waved his hand. What trouble? As long as Architect Dean is willing to sell the new invention to the Green Consortium, we'll give him a castle. It's a small matter. Nicholas was shocked. He used to mix with the aristocrat. He knew the identity of an architect. He didn't expect that Dean was not only an architect but also an extraordinary one. Even the Green Consortium had to send someone to curry favor with him. He thought about the castle from top to bottom but didn't see any item. Our young master hasn't finished his new invention. It's not too late to talk about it after he finishes. The middle-aged man looked at him strangely. He didn't expect Dean to be so lenient towards his subordinate. He even dared to meddle in the master's affairs. But he thought that Dean was an architect and was wholeheartedly focused on the invention. He was relieved. but his attitude towards Nicholas was a bit cold. He thought that if his butler was replaced by Nicholas, then he would have already scolded him. However, Green Consortium is willing to buy it in advance. The price will definitely satisfy Architect Dean. Green Consortium smiled. Even if it isn't done well, Green Consortium is willing to buy it in advance. The price will definitely satisfy Architect Dean. Nicholas had been a butler for many years, so his mind was sharp. He knew that the other party was disgusted when he saw the faint smile on the other's face. He didn't ask any more questions, but he was surprised in his heart. Did he think that the new invention wouldn't be bad? Where did this confidence come from? Or could it be that Dean had already finished the invention but put it in the temple and the Green Consortium got the news? Chapter 276. On the training ground, Dean was standing upside down in a frog-like posture. The fingers of his left hand were gently rubbing the sand on the ground. Although his left hand didn't have any feeling, but he could use his vision to replace the effect of his left hand's movement. By rubbing the sand, he could exercise the flexibility of his fingers. Although the effect wasn't as good as sculpting, but at the moment he was exercising the endurance of his arm. His fingers were idle. Even if there was only a little effect, it was worth it. The most difficult problem was that he couldn't determine the state of his arm. He couldn't even feel the movement of his fist. So he could only rely on visual assistance to exercise. But in a fight, he couldn't focus on the enemy's movements. How could he pay attention to his hand? Therefore, he had to train the feeling of the left hand into an instinct to be able to play a role. Like now, his left hand could cause damage to the door or cup. It was no different from a crippled arm. Time passed. Gray radiation clouds covered the sky. The light was gloomy. The season was about to enter the black snow season. Most of the monsters outside the giant wall had returned to their nests to hibernate. There were few monsters that came out to hunt during the black snow season. This season was also the peak season for hunters. They didn't need to worry about encountering the demon tide. It was easy to meet lone hunters. At the same time, it was also easy to meet lone dormant monsters. In the blink of an eye, it was noon. Sergei was so tired that his forehead was full of sweat. He didn't dare to do too much as he didn't want to tear the wound. He looked back at Dean but saw that the boy was still standing upside down like a stone sculpture. His right arm was slightly trembling but his left arm was motionless. Left-handed? His endurance is very good. There was a trace of appreciation in Sergei's eyes. Previously, when he was expanding the training ground, he would look back to monitor Dean from time to time. He found out that the boy was more self-disciplined than he had imagined. Dean didn't think about being lazy and his endurance was very strong. According to his speculation, it would be good if Dean could persist for 5 hours. This was a relatively difficult task for a senior hunter. After all, the longer he maintained the same posture, the more difficult it would be. The world in Dean's eyes was upside down. He saw Sergei taking a rest. Hurry up and expand. Don't be lazy. Sergei raised his eyebrows. You still have the mind to supervise me? Seems like I've been too kind to you. If you want to talk, talk while working. It's more efficient. Dudian indifferently said. Sergei's face twitched. He coldly snorted and turned around to continue moving the stone block. Dean stood up after half an hour. He shook his sore right hand and said to Sergei, Let's go back to eat. We will continue in the afternoon. Then he turned and left the training ground. Sergei sighed and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He turned around and quickly followed. Dean went back to the living room and looked at the elegant middle-aged man. Who are you? In fact, when the former arrived in the morning, he had already smelled the scent of the other party. He guessed that the other party was most likely a lobbyist sent by other consortiums. The elegant middle-aged man quickly stood up from the chair and smiled. Architect Dean, I'm here on behalf of the Green Consortium. I want to talk to you about the sale of the new invention. Nicholas saw that Dean had finished his training, so he ordered the maid to hand over a towel to wipe his sweat. Dean nodded and went to the dining room. He poured himself a cup of tea. What's the price for the new invention? The elegant middle-aged man didn't expect Dean to be so direct, but it saved him some time. Our price will absolutely satisfy you. What do you think about buying it at the price of a 3-star item? Dean was surprised. He didn't expect the Green Consortium to be the same as the Scott Consortium. He didn't think that the Green Consortium would dare to offer such a high price. However, it also proved that his current value was far higher than when he had just escaped from prison. He had to spend a lot of time and energy to prepare 100,000 gold coins to rent the passage. But now he was sitting at home and didn't do anything. Someone came to his door to give him money. Moreover, the price of a 3-star item was at least 100,000 gold coins. However, he could understand why. After all, he had only produced 2 divine arts in total. One was a new type of textile machine, which was at the legendary level and had the significance of reform. The other one was a 4-star high-grade artifact, which had established his status. It was not simply luck that made him popular. With these 2 divine arts as a guarantee, these consortiums had such strong confidence. 3-star grade. Nicotine's pupil slightly contracted. Although he knew that Dean wasn't an ordinary architect, but he didn't expect the price to be higher than what he had imagined. Dean dared to give such a high price without even seeing the item. Didn't it prove that Dean's level was far beyond the 3-star grade? Was he a master? If Dean was in his 30s, then maybe Nicholas would think so. But the person in front of him was just a teenager. Dean thought for a moment and slowly shook his head. Thank you for the kindness of your consortium, but forget about this matter. Forget about it? The middle-aged man was surprised. He didn't expect that he would be rejected at such a price. He couldn't help but ask, why? Mr. Dean, have you signed a contract with another consortium? No. Dean said bluntly as he saw that the middle-aged man didn't give up. I can't accept this price. By the way, can I trouble you to tell me that my new invention is about to be completed? I can accept advance booking, but the price is 5-star item. 5-star item? Middle-aged man almost bit his tongue. He looked at Dudian in astonishment. Mr. Dean, are you right? Dean solemnly replied, yes, 5-star item. Only then did the elegant middle-aged man confirm that he did not mishear. He was stunned for a moment and smiled bitterly. Mr. Dew, why do you do this? Even if you want to refuse, you don't have to do this. Or you can tell me another price. How about 3-star upper grade? Nicholas's heart skipped a beat. 3-star item? Was this the base price given by the Green Consortium? Weren't they thinking too highly of the kid? Dean shook his head. Not 1 cent less than the price of a 5-star item. The middle-aged man opened his mouth as he saw Dean's determined look. He thought that only a ghost would be willing to buy such a price. After all, he was young and frivolous. He didn't dare to say it out loud. It was meaningless to offend others for no reason. He shook his head and turned to leave. Nicholas couldn't help but look at Dean. He thought that the price was almost the same. He wouldn't be able to squeeze much out of Dean. Dean saw Nicotine's eyes and knew what he was thinking. He slightly shook his head as a signal to send him off. Nicholas was puzzled as he saw that Dean wasn't trying to blackmail him. But on the surface he reacted quickly. He sent the middle-aged man out of the hall. Dean ordered the maid to serve the dishes and prepare lunch by the time Nicholas came back. Nicholas sat in his seat and looked at Dean, who was eating steak. He couldn't help but ask, Master, are you a master from the Temple of Elements? Dean didn't think that Nicholas would come to such a conclusion. If I was a master, then why would I need to be frugal? Nicotine couldn't help but ask, If you are not a master, then why did you refuse the offer from the Green Consortium? The price they offered is already very high, close to 200,000 gold coins. This kind of opportunity is hard to come by. Has your new invention been appraised by the people in the temple and confirmed to be a 5-star invention? Dean smiled. I don't have such a strong relationship, but I am confident. Confidence? Nicholas's eyes widened. Confidence? Gwyneth, Jean and others who were sitting on both sides of the table were surprised as they heard Nicholas's words. Scar gulped. What 200,000 gold coins? What 5-star item? Sergei knew that Dean was an architect when he bought the raw materials yesterday. But he didn't expect his position to be so high. Dean was able to produce a 5-star item. Even if he wasn't a master, then he was very close. Gwyneth's eyes lit up as she silently looked at Dean. After lunch, Dudian rested for a while. Then he took Sergei back to the training ground. This time they were still practicing frog stand, but he allowed Sergei to superimpose several lead plates on his feet. The total weight was about 300 pounds, which was more than twice his body weight. The effect of the exercise was greatly improved. Sergei looked at Dean's desperate appearance but didn't say anything. He continued with his expansion project. In just 2 hours Dean felt his right hand was sore and trembling. He knew that in addition to the weight on his feet, the main reason was that his arm was tired. He clenched his teeth and persisted. Sweat flowed down the bridge of his nose to his eyebrows, and then flowed down his eyebrows to his hair. Soon, the accumulated sweat dripped down from his hair and landed on the sand, drenching it. Time began to slow down. Every minute and second was extremely difficult to bear. It was difficult for Dean to think about other things. He used all his mind on how to divert his attention. At this time, he suddenly felt that his left hand was a kind of happiness. No matter how sore his right arm was, his left hand still didn't feel the slightest. But he knew that the degree of strain in his left hand was the same as his right arm. If the right arm couldn't bear it, the left hand would also suffer the same. Sergei secretly sneered as he looked at Dean's trembling body. He knew that Dean had reached his limit. The sky gradually darkened. The setting sun shone on the training ground, elongating 2 shadows. Sergei wiped his sweat as he looked back. He saw that Dean was still standing like a frog. Dean's body was trembling a bit more than before, but he was still controlling the lead plate so that it didn't tilt and fall. Damn kid! Sergei secretly clenched his teeth as he thought about other difficult training method. After a moment Dean shook his feet and threw the lead plates to the side. He stood up and gasped for breath. He wiped the sweat on his body and said to Sergei, "Let's go back to eat." Sergei was dissatisfied. "I didn't tell you to stop." "Who told you to stop? Didn't you say that I'm the instructor on the training ground?" Dean was startled as he looked at him. "Do you want to continue?" Sergei grunted, "Of course." Dean looked at him. "All right." He stood up again and let Sergei put the lead plates on his feet. He said, "You go too. It's still early, so don't stop." Sergei's face slightly changed. He gritted his teeth and turned to continue to move the stone blocks. Chapter 277. Damn! Don't try to be brave and tear the wound. Sergei's face turned ugly. He used the towel to wipe the sweat on his shoulder to cover the wound. He slightly frowned as he felt the burning pain. Dean had smelled the smell of blood from Sergei's body. He knew the reason as he saw Sergei's action. His mouth curved into a smile as he continued to persist. Sergei looked back at Dudian. He saw that Dudian's arm was shaking, but he was still able to stabilize his body. Sergei's eyes were gloomy. He wanted to announce the end of the training so that his wound would not worsen. But just as the words were about to come out of his mouth, he suddenly stopped. He thought that if he were to admit defeat like this, he would definitely think that he was afraid of getting hurt when he saw his wound. When he thought of this, he steeled his heart and wrapped the towel in front of his chest. He gritted his teeth and continued to pick up the stone blocks on the ground and dismantle the wall. Dean saw that Sergei didn't say anything, but he didn't say anything and continued to hold his breath. After half an hour, Dean felt that his arm was reaching the limit. On the other side, Sergei's breathing was getting heavier. The white cotton towel was dyed blood red. It would inevitably cause a lot of damage if he continued to lose blood. Dean opened his mouth. "Let's stop here for today." Sergei's heart was relieved. It was as if he had finally won a hard battle. He sneered. "What's wrong? You can't hold on any longer?" Dean raised his eyebrows. "I'm afraid that you can't hold on." Sergei snorted. "Me? I won't be affected even if you are tired." Dean's face turned cold. "Is that so? Then let's continue." "Let's continue," Sergei sneered. "Don't shake your feet too much. Be careful of the lead plate." Dean sneered but didn't reply. He clenched his fingers into the sand. He clenched his teeth and tightened his body. He silently hypnotized himself to forget the soreness and fatigue. Time slowly passed. Jean, Scar, Gwyneth, and the others stood at the window-sill behind the castle. They looked at the two stubborn men on the dark training ground with a bitter smile on their faces. At the same time, the blood in their hearts was slightly hot. Jean and Gwyneth were secretly competing against each other. At 9 o'clock in the evening, Sergei finally lost too much blood. He sat on the ground and couldn't stand up. His face was as pale as paper. His body was sweating and his hands and feet were trembling. Nicholas saw the situation from the window and immediately ran over. He asked the maid to prepare new towels and hot water. He helped Nicholas back to the castle. Dean threw off the last lead plate on his feet and fell straight to the ground. His whole body was soft. Scar and Jean rushed over to help him up and sent him back to the castle hall. Nicholas took out the medical box to bandage Dean's wounds when Dean returned. Nicholas's clothes were soaked in blood. He was lying on the chair. His face was weak and dispirited. Dean sat on the chair next to him. His hands were still trembling. His arms were still in a 90-degree position. He didn't dare to move even a little bit, especially his right hand. There was a strong soreness in his right arm. However, he didn't feel anything on his left hand. But considering the problem of exposing his left hand in front of Nicholas and others, he maintained the same posture as his right hand. "Today, I admit defeat," Sergei said in a weak voice. He looked at Dean from the corner of his eyes. He didn't even have the strength to tilt his head. Dean was exhausted but his body wasn't damaged. He had more physical strength than Sergei. A senior hunter is just SOSO. Sergei's eyes twitched but he didn't have the strength to refute. After a moment, Nicholas finished bandaging Sergei's wounds. He looked at both of them and smiled. "Why are you doing this on the first day of training?" "It's too much." Dean panted. "Let's eat. I'm hungry." Nicholas smiled slightly and turned to the maid to serve the meal. Scar and Jean helped Sergei to the dining table. Sergei was also helped to get to the table. Dean's arm was sore, so he could only let the maid next to him replace his arm and feed him. After eating, Dean felt that his physical strength had recovered. The soreness in his arms had reduced a lot. He got up and went upstairs. He closed the door with his shoulder. He sat on the bed and rested for a moment. He took out a wooden carving and a knife from the drawer and started to carve. Fortunately, his left hand didn't feel any pain so he could move freely. He just needed to grab the carving with his right hand and carve with his left hand. After a few hours of exercise, Dean lay down and went to sleep in the early morning. The next day, Dean still got up on time. The first thing he felt after waking up was soreness. He gently lifted his right hand. The soreness made him slightly grit his teeth and inhale. After a night's sleep, his body still hadn't recovered. Yesterday, he had overdrawn himself too much. He had repeatedly exceeded his body's limit. He was completely relying on his unyielding spirit to persevere. Dean sat up, put on his shoes and got out of bed. He shook his arms and went downstairs to the dining room. He saw that Nicholas had already woken up. He asked Nicholas to find hot water to soak his hands in. Breakfast was ready while Nicholas was soaking his hands. The newspaper was delivered at 6:30. Nicholas took the newspaper and served breakfast. Dean took out the hot water and wiped his hands. After soaking them for half an hour, he felt that the soreness in his arms had eased a lot. He didn't feel so unbearable when he bent his arms. He ate breakfast while picking up the newspaper to read. Military report. The new weapon military crossbow has been put into the war in the border war. The effect is surprising. Huaxing Consortium has produced the first batch of military crossbows. There are only 2,000 of them. They have played an unexpected role in the defensive battle at the border fortress of Snow Mountain. The effect of melee combat is obvious. They have successfully defended against the attack of the aliens. The following is an interview with the commander of the defense of Snow Mountain, Colonel Bruno. Dean flipped through the newspaper. The headline news was about the war at Snow Mountain. He didn't expect that the fortress of Snow Mountain would be attacked by barbarians while he was training. Dean's eyes lit up. He estimated that the news had spread to the major consortia before it was published in the newspaper. He didn't expect that the barbarians would dare to take the initiative to attack the fortress. The military crossbow that he had produced was indeed lucky. It showed its greatest value at the right time. He continued to flip through other newspapers. Temple of Elements Daily, the youngest architect in history to win the Epoch Medal. He has produced a 4-star item. The new item is in preparation. What kind of amazing work will the next one be? Green Consortium has reported that Architect Dean's new item has entered the pre-sale state. The price is 5-star item. As Dean expected, he had become the focus of attention of the Temple of Elements. He was also the focus of the major consortia. One of the newspapers even wrote that he had recently bailed out Sergei and other 4 people. However, the one who bailed out was Old Fulin. Only a noble could bail out such a felon. However, it was pointed out that he was also involved in the matter. The questioning words in this report were all an attempt to damage his reputation. Dean was relieved when he saw the source of the newspaper. It was from the Melon Consortium. Chapter 278. The newspapers of Melon and Krulov Consortium directly satirized the price proposed by Dean. Words like arrogant, young and frivolous, arrogant and complacent were used to describe Dean. Moreover, with the idea of offending Dudian to the end, he even took the initiative to help Dudian in the newspaper. He commented that the reason why Dudian offered such a price was because he didn't put the master in his eyes after getting the Times medal. He thought that his work could surpass the master's. Dean smiled indifferently as he read the newspaper. It was estimated that in a few days, the so-called surpassing master remarks would become his own words. No one would care about the truth at that time. Although he had expected it, he didn't think that the Krulov Consortium would be involved. Perhaps the reason was related to him bailing out Sergei. Dean sighed as he thought about Granita, who came to the castle and tried to invite him. It seemed that Granita was the one who coveted Sergei's beauty and wanted to rape him. He reckoned that Granita was very angry when she learned that Sergei was bailed out. When they first met, he felt that this woman looked familiar. Later on, he learned that she was a well-known beauty in the aristocratic circle. Even many realistic oil painting masters had painted her portrait, which was treasured by some wealthy merchants, landlords, and squires. It's impossible for the Krulov Consortium to be enemies with me because of Sergei. Maybe they sent Granita to talk about cooperation, but she didn't get my military crossbow. That's why they got angry out of shame. There was a faint smile on his face. Dean put down the newspaper and gently rubbed his fingers. He was lost in thought. Nicholas stood next to Dean in a respectful manner. His eyes swept over the newspaper that Dean put on the table. Although the font was upside down from his point of view, it didn't prevent him from quickly and accurately skimming through all the information. His pupils shrank when he saw the words Epoch Medal. He didn't think that Dean's identity in the temple would be so honorable. No wonder all the consortiums were paying close attention to him. They didn't hesitate to use the best layout for Dean. Nicholas's eyes flashed as he secretly looked at the boy. His fingers gently clenched in his sleeves. After a moment, Sergei, Gwyneth, and others went downstairs. Sergei's chest was wrapped with a white bandage. Except for the steel nail that was still oozing a faint dark red color, the blood did not spread to the surrounding area. The wound should have already scabbed. Nicotine's eyes flashed. It was indeed one of the top 10 rare Steel Dragon magic marks. The body's healing power was amazing. Sergei was standing on the stairs. His eyes swept towards the boy who had woken up and was eating breakfast in the dining room. His sleepy eyes slightly narrowed as he paused for a moment before continuing to walk down the stairs. Exercise in the morning and rest in the afternoon, Dean indifferently said as he looked at Sergei, who had a gloomy face. Rest in the afternoon? Sergei was slightly surprised. There was a bit of joy in his gloomy eyes, but he quickly realized his expression. He quickly put away his joy and said, "You are quite lazy." Dean glanced at him. "Is that so?" Sergei's back felt cold as he looked at Dean's smiling eyes. He turned his head and pulled out a chair to sit down. He looked at Nicholas. "What are you doing? Where is my breakfast?" Nicholas's mouth slightly twitched. He turned to the maid next to him. "Bring the breakfast." "Yes," the maid quickly replied. After breakfast, Dean returned to the training ground to continue his exercise. Scar and Jean joined him as he was halfway through his training. One of them said to Dean, "We have nothing to do. Let's move our muscles and bones." Dean didn't stop them but reminded them, "Don't tear your wounds. We are going to hunt outside the giant wall." Both of them agreed and immediately changed their mind. They didn't learn from Dean's frog stand, but used other methods to exercise their waist, legs, and flexibility. Although such a high-intensity exercise, even if they persisted day after day for 10 years, the increase in strength wouldn't be as much as a bottle of God's blessing. But through the exercise they would be able to master all parts of the body. Moreover, they would be able to exert twice the results with half the effort in battle. Sergei didn't pay attention to Scar and Jean. For him, his obligation was to teach Dean. As for the others, he was too lazy to pay attention to them. In the blink of an eye, it was noon. The four of them returned to the castle. After lunch, Scar and Jin's stomach had almost digested the lunch. They went back to the training ground to familiarize themselves with the skills of the past. Dean asked Gwyneth and Sergei to move the steel to the basement. There were several basements under the castle. Some were used to store goods while others were used to expand the alchemy room. Dean told them to leave after the materials were delivered. He warned Nicholas that no one should disturb him while he was working on the invention. Dean closed the door of the alchemy room. He used the wood that was already prepared in the room to carve the model of the generator parts. He used his right hand to hold the knife while his left hand held the wooden board. With the previous experience of exercising his left hand, Dean felt that the flexibility and control of his right hand had improved a lot, and he was able to carve with ease. Shortly after Dean entered the alchemy room, Nicholas, Gwyneth, and Sergei appeared in a remote room. Nicholas looked at Sergei. There was a trace of vigilance in his eyes as he looked at Gwyneth. "Now the three of us are in the same boat. The two little guys on the first floor are cellmates with the kid. Their relationship is extraordinary. They are determined to follow the kid. The three of us have to unite in order to get rid of the kid and completely restore our freedom." Sergei looked at him with interest. So, do you have a plan? Nicholas looked at him. We know nothing at present. It is a waste of time to make any plans. The first thing we have to do is to find out the details of the kid. As far as we know, the kid is not only a hunter but also an architect of the Temple of Elements. From these two identities we can infer that the kid's family was a commoner and relatively wealthy. But since the kid is a hunter, it means that his family doesn't have any power behind them. They have nothing to do with the nobles. Sergei chuckled. I don't need you to analyze this. Nicotine's face turned cold as he mocked. Is that so? Then tell me, what do you know? Didn't you go out with him the day before yesterday? Don't tell me that you didn't get anything. There was a trace of imperceptible coldness in his eyes. Sergei slightly sneered. At least more than you know. The day before yesterday, this kid took me to the raw materials market to buy steel. Today was the batch that was delivered. At that time, I knew that he was an architect of the temple. Moreover, his position was quite high. Yesterday, the Green Consortium came to invite him and offered such a high price. This kid's status in the temple is estimated to be close to that of a master, if not a master. The most important thing is that the kid doesn't have any power behind him. He is the mastermind. He doesn't have any power behind him. Nicholas's eyes flashed. Sergei indifferently said, The kid took me to the Ryan family. The Ryan family is as broken as the rumors say. They don't have the money to bail us out. The money must have been earned by the kid using his identity as an architect. I guess that after the kid escaped from prison, he hijacked the Ryan family. Then he signed a contract with the Ryan family as a hunter. He seems to belong to the Ryan family, but in fact, the Ryan family is completely under his control. Therefore, the kid should be the mastermind behind the scenes. Judging from the fact that he was able to escape from prison, the kid's scheming is enough to do this. Nicholas looked at him deeply, nodded slowly, and said, That's not bad, but to be cautious we need to grasp more information. Sergei snorted but didn't say anything. Nicholas looked at the time. We can't stay together for a long time. We don't want to be noticed by the servants. All right, I'll go out first. Sergei shrugged his shoulders, then turned and left the room. Nicholas quietly came to the door and listened to the footstep. When the footsteps gradually disappeared, he turned back to the room and asked Gwyneth, What do you think about what he said just now? Gwyneth quietly looked at him. What do you think? Nicholas rubbed his chin and said, When I saw them come back, this brat put his hand on him, and his attitude towards him changed greatly. I really can't trust him. That alone doesn't mean anything. Gwyneth whispered. Nicholas nodded. Yes, but we don't know if it's true or false, so it's better to isolate him. If he wasn't bought by the kid, then everything he said is true. But there are a lot of loopholes in his words. First of all, the kid is the mastermind behind the scenes and the Ryan family is just a shield for him. So where did he learn the ability to make divine incantations? There is no such high level of knowledge in the library that can only be accessed by civilians. In addition, even if he has the ability to make inventions, don't forget that the power that put an intermediate hunter in prison is one of the 6 consortiums. Even if it's not, it's one of the top nobles. It's impossible that they don't know about the kid's escape. How can the Ryan family protect this kid if they know about it? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.